Oh, thank you for that, Complex. Yeah, I was talking and no one could hear me. Yeah, let me share my screen. Let me get started, and then oh.
United States Senate, and one of them out of Florida says that the Congressional Black Caucus is keeping him from joining. Joining us right now is Congressman, first of all, Byron Donalds. Congressman, glad to have you on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Of course, anytime. Thanks for having me.
First and foremost, and so you said you wanted to join. When did you last communicate with the Congressional Black Caucus? What was the process, and what was said to you? And who did you talk to?
Well, actually, it was really the first week I was up here on Capitol Hill after swearing in. I talked with a couple of members. I know Joyce Beatty and I, we had a brief conversation on the floor. The question was asked, would I be interested in joining? I said I would be interested in joining. When I was in the Florida legislature, I had joined. I was a part of the Legislative Black Caucus for 4 years. And so at that point, it was just, she was like, okay, well, we'll be in touch. I said, okay. And we didn't hear anything. So I had my staff reach out, a couple times over the last few months. We never heard anything. And then last week, the story drops on BuzzFeed, which, shocked me, shocked us here, in my office. And then, here we are.
So when you say it shocked you, and so they, of course, BuzzFeed did a story saying that you were being blocked from joining the CBC. You reached out. You had not joined them. So that was not a story that your staff put out. So you're not aware where the story came from.
No, we never put anything out. In my office, my staff understood that we weren't going to talk about it. We were going to just, have those conversations quietly. So when you see an article drop, you're kind of like, well, where'd this come from? And I mean, look, let's keep it real. If I was going to drop a story, I wouldn't drop it in BuzzFeed. That doesn't make any sense. I would have dropped it on foxnews.com, but that's not where it dropped. Obviously, they've covered it. CNN has covered it. A lot of people have. But I'm not in the business of dropping leaks to reporters. That's not how I operate. For me, if I feel a certain way, I'll come and meet with you directly and tell you. I'm not going to use media to do it.
Why do you want to join the CBC?
I think actually it's important to have the conversations that affect obviously the Black community and the different policies that will. My politics might be different from a lot of the members in the CBC, but that's no different than how it was when I was in the Florida legislature. But I think those conversations from all sides of the political spectrum are very, very important because it can help actually distill a lot of these ideas down into ways that will be most effective, not just for the Black community. Because you got to understand that when you legislate, you can't just write a bill for the Black community. You have to write legislation that impacts the entire country. So obviously you want it to have positive impacts on the Black community, but you also have to understand in the back of your mind, it's going to have impact.
So I want to stop this here. There's been a lot of discussion in the Manosphere where people say, oh, why didn't the Democrats, have a Black agenda? How come there's no Black agenda? I don't see any Black male agenda, targeting Black men. He just explained that to you. This is a conservative within the Republican Party who has made his bones, taking conservative positions. Now, when you ask the question, well, why haven't Biden contacted Ice Cube? Why haven't, the Democrats come up with an agenda targeting Black men? He just explained it to you. Okay. All right, let me see if anybody's trying to get on real quick. Nope, nobody's trying to get on. All right, if you're trying to get on, just say something in the chat room so I can see. Yeah, there's a link in the chat. If you scroll up, there's a link right there. All right, let me continue this, man.
Impacts for all of the country. You want to make sure that those things operate for everybody so everybody can thrive and succeed. Secondarily, I think it's important that you have these relationships that exist in the legislative process, because it changes it from just being Congressman Donald or the new Black Republican to being, well, that's just Byron. And so let me sit down with Byron and figure out where he's coming from. I can share with him where I'm coming from, and maybe we can find a way forward.
When it came to the passage of the House Bill 1 dealing with the issue of voting, how did you vote?
I voted no on that bill, and I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, in Florida, we actually have, in my view, the best election law in the country. We have massive access points to the ballot. You can get your absentee ballot anywhere about 2 to 3 months before election day. It's really like 3 months before election day. You have really good opportunities to vote through early voting, some of the best in the country. And then, of course, you have election day. We do have voter ID laws. We have things like that have been in Florida law for more than 20 years. And so, in my view, representing a district in Florida, why would I support the federal government taking over election law when I know my state and the area I represent already has great election laws where people have the opportunity to go vote and nobody challenges them?
Because the reality is that it's not just a question of what happens in your state, it's what's happening in other states as well. When it came to the certification of electors, how did you vote?
I actually voted not to certify in Pennsylvania and Arizona.
Why?
But the other 48 states were never contested.
Why?
Well, because it's very clear. Hold on, let me get to that. Because it was actually clear, based upon the information I was looking at, that in Arizona and Pennsylvania there were violations of election law. And so you have a situation where, under the Constitution, state legislatures write election law. And I know the argument is, but there was a pandemic, so adjustments had to be made. But let's be very clear, it is not the role of a supervisor of elections or the state elections officer or any judge to change election law.
But I thought Republicans believed in the rule of law and judges ruled. And in fact, I thought Republicans believed in the rule of law and judges ruled. Secondly, you also had more than 60 court cases where it was challenged.
MOT, you trying to say something?
No, I haven't said anything.
Okay.
In the courts, Donald Trump and his team lost all of them.
The point is not whether the court cases were won or lost. The point is that when you're looking at electoral college votes, you have to look at what the law was and what the actual implementation of law was at the time. The judges and the courts, they have their role. They did whatever they felt was necessary, but Congress also has a role as well. Congress does have the responsibility of certifying electoral college votes. And it's important for people to understand that this is not the first time electoral college votes were challenged. They were challenged in 2000. They were challenged in 2004. There was a member of the Democrat conference who challenged in 2016, and that went away. So these things have happened in our past in our country. So just saying now with the election of Joe Biden that because you challenged in 2020, now that creates some dynamic where now you're to be ostracized or punished or whatever.
So I'm curious. So that's very curious, because you just said that you did not want federal law change to impact voting there in Florida, but you in Florida are forming an opinion on voting in Arizona and Pennsylvania when the elections in Arizona and Pennsylvania were actually certified by Republican officials and others in those two states. And so how do you know what's better in Arizona and Pennsylvania when you're in Florida?
Because there's a process where Congress certifies and ratifies electoral college votes.
But no, you answer my question. How do you know? You answer my question. How do you know what's better? How do you know that there were irregularities when there are officials in Arizona and Pennsylvania who have said there wasn't?
The difference is that H.R. 1 actually goes against most of the way the Constitution is actually written.
No, that's not what I asked. That's not what I asked. Congress, that's not what I asked.
H.R. 1 and election laws.
No, that's not what I asked. It's not what I asked. What I asked is, how do you stated that there were election irregularities, but there were officials in Arizona and Pennsylvania, even of your own party, who said that the elections were fair, the elections that you did not have violations, that you did not have fraud. How are you, a congressman in Florida, to know what actually happened in Arizona and Pennsylvania when the officials there stated what happened in their own state?
But listen, first of all, you're assuming that I can't read as well. Of course,
No, I'm not assuming. I'm not assuming. But if there are people of your own party, we have publicly stated. I'm just trying to understand, how do you know what happened there when they say it didn't happen?
Let me answer your question. Let's take the state of Pennsylvania, for example. It is crystal clear, no matter what anybody wants to say, is that the state Supreme Court changed election law unilaterally. Under Pennsylvania's law, you're not allowed to accept ballots after the polls close on election day. The state Supreme Court of Pennsylvania unilaterally changed that to accepting ballots 3 days after election.
Are they the highest court in Pennsylvania?
Can I finish my point? If you change the law at the court level, but knowing that under the Constitution, state legislatures are the ones who write election law, you're changing the rules at the end of the game. That's the reality. That's what happened. And so
is the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court the highest court in the land?
You have a decision to make at the level we have when it comes to certifying electoral college.
Let me ask you this question. Did the United States Supreme Court, I got to ask you a question.
Not to certify, based upon the reasoning that in those two states in particular, laws, the actual implementation, the actual practice of elections were not followed under law that was passed by the state legislature, which is the law of the land under the United States Constitution.
First of all, it doesn't matter what he thinks in Florida, what's going on in Pennsylvania and Arizona. He's trying to insert himself while at the same time claiming states' rights. Okay.
Yeah.
You're acting
So,
like you're, yeah, go ahead.
All right. So here's something that needs to be very clear.
Mhm.
The highest participation for Black people in the South happened after Reconstruction. You want to know why? The federal government ran the elections. The National Guard ran the elections. There was no BS, none of that stuff. And guess what happened during Jim Crow? The amount of Black people who voted disappeared. Why? It wasn't equal. It wasn't fair. They came up with all these things and rigmarole for these things not to happen. Because in the Constitution, it says you don't need an actual ID to vote, poll tax. Now, if you offer free IDs in order for people to vote, that would make sense. But in conservative areas, which are counted much quickly than actual big cities, they have polling locations everywhere. But in these more liberal areas, in these conservative states, they have limited places for you to actually vote. That's why it takes long lines and all this type of nonsense in order to vote in these actual areas. So if you just turn it over to the National Guard, so that way people could just go in and vote, constitutionally and get up out of there, it wouldn't be a problem. But the reason why they want to do all this states' rights stuff is because they want to put impediments in place so that way you cannot participate in the political process. The Republicans know if you participate more in the political process, it's not going to go towards them. The lesson that you have people participate in the political process, they win. It should easily be people to be locked up for any of this type of stuff, but not really understanding this specific and simple fact. It's very historic what happened. So.
All right.
Donald Trump and his people sue, and did the Supreme Court reject the argument that you just made?
The Supreme Court chose not to take up the case, but
that's a rejection.
They did not take up the case.
That's a rejection.
But the Supreme Court is a separate branch of government.
But wait, hold on. But so is Congress. And so I'm trying to understand. If you're making an argument,
it's a vote in front of us. We have the opportunity to cast that vote as well. Just because a court says something or the Supreme Court says something, when the matter comes before Congress, you still have to cast a vote, yay or nay. They didn't lock the voting machines and said, well, this is all over, and so there's no vote for Congress to take. There is actually a vote. There is a constitutional process that happens.
Got it.
It's a constitutional process that has happened multiple times before. And so to distill this whole entire argument down to certification votes on January 6th, that's really far afield from the full conversation we're even having right now about membership in the Black.
No. I'm asking you, but you talked about.
This is why I'm going to make that point, because if the premise of this conversation we're having right now is that my intellect, my past, my road from the inner city to the halls of Congress, my policy beliefs, if all those things are now irrelevant because my vote on certification.
No, I didn't say that. First of all, who said that? Who said that?
That's the argument that you're presenting.
Actually, you're wrong. No, Congressman, you're wrong. Congressman, you're wrong. I'm asking you a series of questions in terms of how you voted on particular bills that And for the black community, in terms of where issues are, George Floyd Justice Act, how would you vote?
Wait, say that again. You broke.
George,
I didn't hear what
George Floyd Justice Act, how did you vote?
Oh, I didn't vote for that bill. I voted against it. And the reason why I voted against that bill is because of qualified immunity. I think the qualified immunity provision in that bill are actually going to be very harmful to police forces in urban corridors, because the reality of qualified immunity, in my view, and having talked with many officers in law enforcement, is that if you change qualified immunity standards, you're actually going to have less officers on the street. If you have less officers on the street, it's actually going to lead to higher crime.
What? What? Like, listen, you voted against George Floyd Justice and Policing Act because you wanted to be a police officer. I don't give a shit about what the police think. I don't care about that. Listen, can you actually not put yourself at risk by shooting every person you come across? Of course you can. How can you have higher rules of engagement for the United States military, but the rules of engagement for local police are far less than that? It just doesn't make any sense. Like I said, when you make statements like this, you should be locked up. There's no way you should be in charge of anything. And he cited it only for urban corridors. Don't you understand that the actual that stuff affects white people in actual other areas too? So you just can't leverage, oh, well, you know what? They just won't be able to shoot black people. I'm like, no, in these poor rural areas, in these conservative ran states, they treat those people out there just like they treat black people in big cities. Yes, they do. They do not like people without power, challenging them at all. And they go way overboard when it comes to arresting them. So all this cop worship is just that he don't believe in the Constitution. It's crazy.
And to your point, the white man that was in the wheelchair outside of Home Depot that got shot 7 times by the officer, they actually let him off.
Yes.
Imagine that.
The climate nowadays. I mean, nowadays, they're all going to jail. But like, yeah, there's a lot of times where you're seeing tape of people doing stuff and they completely got off because of qualified immunity. I mean, like, I wouldn't want qualified immunity against somebody who works at a restaurant or anything else, but we allow it for police. It doesn't make any sense. Listen, if you don't want to do your job, we'll just replace you with somebody else who would do the job the way that it is. This is why I don't believe in police unions. It should be controlled by the people of the state. Period.
Let's go to real Dana. Dana, what do you have? Thank you for
Can you
joining.
hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, ma'am, we can. Yeah.
Hi, man. Tomorrow. Hi, Mike.
Hey,
Hey.
how's it going, man?
Hey, so I was looking, I saw the title and then I was listening to your conversation. So I kind of disagree with you a little bit, man, tomorrow, because I
Sure.
think that the problem that I'm having more so with the Democrats, and I would say just both parties, like people think that, with the Democrats, they're just completely so liberal, socialist, even Marxist or whatever. And, even though a lot of people pin the Republicans to be like conservatives or religious, and they try to say that they're racist, which is not true. But for me personally, I just think that I identify more with the Republican side as far as, freedom of speech, or having your own ideology, right? But it's not black. People think it's just either or, and it's not, because I don't have a problem with people you have to show your ID to vote. I don't think that voting should be taken over by the federal government. It should be operated within the state. I am for showing your ID when you vote, because you should be able to prove that you live, in that state, in that county, or that city for local elections, and a United States resident, and you're not, you don't have a green card, or you're illegal. And I do have a problem with how they're doing the censorship, the Democrats, how they want to count people at like bodies. So we do need more regulations, and I don't think that is what is the Democrats trying to paint it as, trying to take your right to vote away, especially from Black people? I don't think that's the case. And when
Yeah,
you were
but
talking, just real quick,
the
when
whole
you, oh, go ahead.
yeah, but the whole entire voter ID thing isn't really caught up in just ID. In the Constitution, you don't need to pay in order to vote. Now, if they're going to provide free IDs to people, I have no problem with it. Free voter cards to people, I have no problem with it. But that's constitutional. I mean, the opinion of whether or not they show their ID, I agree with you there. But in the Constitution, it says you don't need one, and they don't ask whites for their actual like me, the actual area that I vote in. I've never been asked for an ID. However, when I changed my actual voter registration to go to another state, yeah, they ask me for my ID every single time. It's just Black people every single time. They don't even bother asking white people for their ID ever. So that's what I'm
Well,
saying. That
Well, I
it's either you
disagree
have
with
it
you
or you
on
don't
that.
have it.
well,
And this is
the-
why, just real quick, this is why I disagree with you on that, because this is why Democrats are hypocrites. Because I live in New Jersey in a blue, because New Jersey flips us the whole state, but I live in a blue county, a blue city, nothing but Black people that is in a city hall, right? Local elections and stuff like that. So when I went to vote, the first thing they asked me was for my ID. And my thing is, and I didn't have a problem showing it to them, because yeah, there is a such thing as voter fraud. If the Democrats had their way, they would let all the illegals vote.
yeah, but they
So
can't. But they can't vote because their names are not on the rolls.
Yes.
your name is on a roll if you live somewhere. So
No, if you're not registered to vote, then your name doesn't show up on the rolls. That's why they
right.
scroll
But
down.
if
That's
the
why they scroll
Democrats,
down the list to
right?
verify
No,
if
I
it's you or
I
not.
get all that. But if the Democrats had their way, they will allow them to vote. That's what they're doing in New York City. They are allowing illegals. If you are not a citizen, you can vote in New York City on a local level. So they
Because you
make
can't have taxation
stipulations.
without representation.
You're not a citizen.
No, but there's certain areas where you can participate.
No, if you're not a United States citizen, you should not be voting.
Who determines that?
What do you mean? Who determines that?
If
Why
you're
would you?
saying, is that
So
federal or is
so you
that
don't have a
state?
problem. You don't have a problem with an illegal person who's a non-citizen. You don't have a problem with them voting.
No, I have a problem when they say that student IDs are not legitimate forms of IDs for voting, but a gun license is. Who has gun licenses and who has student IDs?
So is that the only ID that you need to have is a gun?
No, that's what
ID?
Republicans established that
No.
in these
So
in
are the
these areas.
Republicans?
Yeah.
Wait. Are they saying no student IDs, but you can have a state ID and a gun ID or whatever else ID, but you just can't have a college ID?
A student ID is a state ID.
No, it's a student ID is for that college. It's not a state ID.
Yeah, but it's registered by the state itself. You wouldn't be at that school if you didn't have that ID.
No, that's not true, because you could go to a school and be registered in another state. You just go to a college out of state. That's why they have out of state and in-state tuitions, and tuitions are different from out of state and in-state residents.
Yeah, but
Out
if
of
you're on
state, they're not a resident in that state. So you just going a student ID is not a government ID.
it's a state ID though.
No, it's not a state ID. A state ID would be a government ID. It's not a state ID. It's for that school. It's for that school that you attend.
I think it varies state by state. Like some states accept them, some don't.
Yeah, some states this is what I'm saying. Some states will accept a student ID for you to register if you are registered as a resident in that state. But if you're not a resident in that state, why are you voting on local elections if you're not a resident there?
Well, my understanding in places like Texas, for example, I don't believe they'll accept student IDs because they were kind of controversial. They do things like they'll accept like a fisherman's license or a hunting license, but I don't believe they'll accept a student ID regardless if you're a student, in-state student or not. But then some states will.
But in Wisconsin, that is the case, right? We know that in Wisconsin that you can vote on campus.
If you are a resident in that state.
You're a resident if you stay on campus.
No, you're not.
Oh,
That doesn't make you a resident, because if, again, you have to register with that state as a resident to be a resident of that state. This is why colleges have out-of-state tuition and in-state resident tuition. It's because in-state residents of that state get lower tuition. Their tuition fees are lower than out-of-state students.
Mm-hmm.
So you just because you go to a school, all those students at that school are not residents in that state unless you literally apply for state residency.
That's why they have same-day registration in order to make up for that.
In Wisconsin, especially.
But if students, and a lot of times students don't register if they go to school out of state, they don't register to be a resident in that state.
But you can vote absentee.
They don't want to because they know they're registered to vote in their home state.
But you can
Once
vote
you get
absentee
caught,
to your home state.
They do check those databases and actually for duplicates. This is how these people get caught. So look, if they're going to vote twice, then they're going to go to jail for it. Especially if you're a black person. But if you're a white person, you don't get to go to jail for it. Especially if you're
No, they can tell. They can tell. They can tell when they look at the rolls. They know who voted, who's registered to vote and who's not registered to vote.
Yeah, no. If you go to the wrong precinct and try to vote, they'll turn you away.
So let me just give this one more example, right? Because I'm just talking about the hypocrisy of Democrats. Because in New Jersey, the state flips from Republican to Democrat as far as governor. But in Essex County, it's blue. And when I lived in East Orange, they asked for my ID. Everyone's black. That's Black City. And when I lived in Newark, they didn't ask for my ID. And Newark is Black, Hispanic, Portuguese, and I lived in an Ironbound section. So you give them your name, and they find your name, and you just not. I had to show them anything. But in the Blacker city up the hill, they asked for my state ID, and she was dead ass serious. And I just found that odd. Like, wait a minute, you're the same people that sit up here, and tote these Democrat talking points about, no voter ID or voter suppression, but you asked me for my ID, the same thing that you go against. And then she saw one of the ladies, I guess, they got some new damn machine. And she saw that I wrote a Republican. She looked at me like I was crazy. But I'm like, you just asked me for my damn ID. So
they can't. Come on, Dana. They're not that close to see how you actually voted. There's no voter person at the voter actual station who can see exactly how you voted. You mean like close enough to the actual screen?
So
there's nobody that close.
No.
They had a new machine, and she asked, and I'm like, what is this? Because I'm used to going behind the curtain and you press a button and then you turn this thing. So it was something else. You had to like check it off and then you slide it in a machine. She was like, well, do you mind me coming in helping you fill it out? So I said that she could come closer to help me fill it out. And I'm like, I'm voting across here, which is all Republican. So that's
So after you voted, what did you do? Like, because I voted in multiple states. Like some states, it's just like you basically have a card. Like in Georgia, you have a card. I think you put it in, you vote, and then you pull your card out, and then you hand your card in. Another one is they have like a long piece of paper, you put it in the machine, you fill out your votes, and then you hand it in. That's how I did it in Maryland.
So that's what I'm saying. So all right, so in the one in East Stars, and that was the first time I did it. It's like I had to fill out a card, and you slide it in some machine. And I don't know if something came out or it just takes it, but that's the first time I did that, right? Sliding into a machine, because any other time since I've been voting since I was 18 in New Jersey, you go into a booth, close a curtain, and you press like a button and it lights up green for the ones you select, like an X, and then you slide the thing across and then that pushes your vote in. So that sliding a card in a machine was something new that they were doing in the city of East Orange. So yeah, so I was like, how do you do this? And so when she asked, can I approach to help you fill it out? So that's how she saw who I was voting for. But the point is, that's the first thing that came out their mouth was, where's your vote? Where's your ID? We need your ID.
Yeah, but it's not general across the board. It's not generalized across the board, and the actual voter suppression thing does not stop at voter ID. It's not just voter ID. It's never been just voter ID anywhere. It's about all types of other things. But we only want to focus on the hypocrisy of the Democrats, but we did not want to focus on all the actual restrictions of voting that came in Georgia. We only just want to focus on Democrats when it's convenient, but the historical actual thing, we don't even want to question it at all. We just want to, oh, this is when the Democrats Colorado is way different. We do our stuff on the screen. There's no cards or any of that stuff. So I have no idea how that works where you was voting at. I have no idea. I have no experience with that.
Yeah, and the thing here is Donald talked about voting, nay on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act bill because of qualified immunity. But, it seems like all the areas that would benefit Black people, he seems to vote against. But so why would you want to be a part of the Congressional Black Caucus if that's the way you're going to vote against the people's interests?
He doesn't even represent a Black district. So, that's a lot of things that people don't want to talk about with a lot of these Black Republicans is they don't represent Black districts. They usually represent at best a district that's kind of mixed.
I don't know if it's your connection or.
Wait, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You might want to log off and log back in.
All right, hold on. All right.
Let me finish playing the video because I don't want to get bogged down.
Rates in our cities. We're already seeing that right now with the elements in different cities where police budgets have been shrank down, or you want to call it defunding police or whatever you want to call it. The correlation effect is real. If there's less officers on the street, crime rates have gone up.
Well, first of all, there are examples. Congressman, there are examples where police in Chicago and Baltimore chose not to actually do their job because they were angry when one of their own actually were indicted by the DA, and then also crime went up because they chose to slow down. Let me ask you another question. So you saw the John Lewis Act. How did you vote on that?
This is the bill about John Lewis's Act dealing with voting rights, but also bringing back pre-clearance.
Yep.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yep.
I no on that bill. I don't believe that we need
the COVID bill. How did you vote?
Oh, that bill is trash. I voted no on that bill.
On the American Relief, how did you vote on that?
Say that again.
On the American Relief Plan, how did you vote on that?
Wait, what? Say that again.
You had the COVID bill, and so you said that bill was trash. So here's my question: out of all the bills that have been come through the House, where African Americans have that from an African, first of all, the COVID hate crime bill. How'd you vote on that?
The Asian American hate crime.
Actually, not the Asian American. Is that actually not the Asian American hate crime bill? It's actually Asian Americans not even in the actual title, to paraphrase it, it's been called the anti-Asian hate crime bill. How'd you vote on that?
I voted no on that bill because we don't need to have that bill. That bill is not necessary for what's happening right now in the country. Do you have an issue with what's say to be Asian hate that may be rising? Potentially, maybe. But let's also.
It's not potentially, maybe. The facts are there. The data is there. It was even documented under the Trump DOJ.
When you had the shooting that occurred in Atlanta, Georgia, every element of law enforcement came out and said at that point in time and several weeks after that it was not a quote unquote hate crime. There were other things that were.
That was one shooting. That was one shooting.
To pass that bill, so that's what happened. So I voted no on that bill.
Gotcha. If making Juneteenth becomes a national holiday comes before the House, how would you vote?
I'm sorry, we were talking over each other.
If it comes before the House to make Juneteenth a national holiday, how would you vote?
Oh, I would vote yes on that. I think Juneteenth should be a national holiday.
So if HR 40 comes to the House floor, how would you vote?
Which one is HR 40?
HR 40 deals with creating to study the impact of slavery. It's called the reparations bill to create a study of it, not actually to grant reparations, but to actually study the very issue. How would you vote?
Actually, I just finished reading that bill. I would vote no on that bill.
So,
gotcha. So out of all
when people in the Manosphere want to sit up here and ask, why don't Democrats, move faster on the reparations bill on HR 40 and get reparations going? There you go. Another person within the Republican Party who votes against it. Mitch McConnell said if it comes across his desk, he will veto it. Lindsey Graham said, I don't think, black people deserve reparations. Okay. John Kennedy in Louisiana, he said himself, I don't believe in reparations. Okay. What's this other fellow? What's this other fellow?
Tim Scott.
Yeah, Tim Scott. also said, also voted against it as well. So what are we talking about here? Okay.
Well, wait, hold on for a second, because every Democrat did not vote yes on the HR 40, because if they did, it would have passed the House when the Democrats controlled the House in the last term. So
yeah, Kristen
every
Sinema
Democrat-
and Joe Manchin. Yep.
Wait 1 second. Every Democrat didn't even vote yay for HR 40. And HR 40 been sitting there collecting dust since the 80s. So that's a bullshit ass bill. The Congressional Black Caucus is BS. They're full of it. They're liars. Their focus is LGBT,
Okay, well, I got a question
Asian, and
for you.
everybody else. That COVID-19 bill was an Asian bill. All that money for the Asians, nothing for Black people, nothing for poor people. And all those other bills was helping illegals and everybody else. So, okay, he voted no on those bills, but those bills wasn't helping us.
Okay, so Dana, I have a very specific question.
Mm-hmm.
How come you have not worked on the Republican side to get more Republicans to vote for the HR 40?
Work on their side to do what? What do you mean? Like convince the Republican politicians?
Absolutely, yes. Why
Because
does it
you
have to be
don't,
only the Democrats who do it? Like, how come nobody is going to the Republicans to convince them to come over and vote for HR 40? Could you give me an explanation for that?
because I'll tell you why. Because Black people are not pushing for HR 40 or any bill to be passed
wait,
on a state. Wait, slow down. Wait, I'm answering your question on a
Okay.
federal or state level. So I always talk about this, but the fact is that you are electing those representatives to in the House, in the Senate, on your state level. That's from your district that you are voting in, and they're not even pushing it. So if I live in a Republican city that I have to vote for the people in Congress, for the House and the Senate, of course I will be pushing it. So the Democrats where I live at, that I started, I continue to no longer vote for them because I was pushing them to push reparations, and they were not doing it. See, what we're seeing is a superficial surface of media talking about reparations. Y'all have no idea on a ground level what is going on behind the scenes, because it's not the Republicans that are saying we don't want Black people to get reparations. It's actually the
Really?
Democrats.
Wait, real
Wow,
Dana,
come on,
can you give some
And I'm gonna
insight?
give you a prime example. Let me give you a prime example that I had.
Okay,
that
Dana.
Wait a second.
My
No.
question was specifically about Republicans to
Yes,
be
and this
convinced
is
to
one
vote
thing
for
you
the
can't
actual
do.
bill. So if
you
the
are a
Democrats
Black
actually
person-
voted for the bill in plurality and no Republicans voted for it, why are we letting the Republicans off the hook for not voting for reparations?
I'm not letting them off the hook. What I'm saying is that HR 40 has been sitting on John Connor's old ass desk for over 30 years. The Democrats could have passed that bill through the House, at least through the House. It didn't even get from the subcommittee. It never even passed the subcommittee. So you're
So we're just
focusing
gonna let
on
all the Republicans off the hook every time?
You're not listening to my point. You're not listening to what I'm saying. If you want to focus on the Republicans, you need to focus on the Republicans when you need to. You need to focus on the Democrats that's not even passing it out of subcommittee. So I don't care
That's
about
why
the
you
Republicans.
focus on Republicans. You don't care?
No, because I don't care
Wow.
about the Republicans when the Democrats are controlling the House.
I think
Okay.
first.
You control the House. You can pass whatever
The
bill
Republicans
goes
control
through.
the House right now. How come they're not
That's
voting in the
now.
majority to pass HR 40?
They just took over the House last month. You're not going to sit up here and tell me, oh, why you not telling Republicans to pass that bill when the Democrats been controlling the House for the past, 8 years? Like, come on, stop.
You have the
And this is what I'm
Republicans
saying.
in charge.
If you
Democrats have not been controlling the House the past 8 years. They just picked it up back in 2018. Anyway,
if you are not in your local area where you live at, if you have not sat down with organizations, if you have not sat down with your local representatives, your state legislators, and the ones you vote to go to Congress, you don't have a bite in this dog fight. You do not. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I do. I know
Dana, can you give us an example of who you sat down with on reparations?
I can give you a prime example, because the organizations, when I was in New Jersey, that I was linked up to is a direct organization that works with politicians in New York and New Jersey.
What's the name of the organization?
Let me finish. We had the Black Conference, the State of the Black World Conference, ITW, IBW. So we have politicians come in, all that, reparations, talking about reparations on the panels, all that. What pushes bills on a low, it starts on your local level. When you organize on a local level and you tell these politicians, this is our agenda, this is what we need, this is what we're putting money behind for you to go push. When that conference where all these powerful Black people and others was there for the focus of the Black agenda, when that conference was over, because I sat on that board, when the conference is over, we go back and we talk about the conference and what's going to come next. Right there, they said ADOS is a problem. This reparations talk is a problem. Our number one focus is to make sure Trump is not reelected. So let's go back 4 years when reparations was hot. That's when the Democrats controlled the House. When HR 40 or any bill could have passed the House, the Democrats' focus was to make sure Trump was not reelected, and they took the focus off of Black people, and they told Black people Trump is racist, so you need to not reelect him, and then we'll worry about reparations and everything else later. But that's bullshit.
Okay,
see, that's
so
behind the scenes that you don't see.
It doesn't even matter. I mean, because if you're never going to hold Republicans responsible for voting for reparations and only trying to leverage it when Democrats are in power, you're not even serious about reparations.
No, I am serious because you're not strategic. I'm being very strategic.
Okay, so who have you got on the Republican side to vote for reparations?
Where I live at, wait a minute, you got to understand where I live at. If it's nothing but Democrats to pass anything or to get any type of support, if they're not pushing a Black agenda, it's not even about whether it's going to, if the Republicans going to vote for it, they're never going to see it to vote.
Wait.
See, this question that Roland Martin asked him was a hypothetical question because it never passed subcommittee. He's just saying, well, I'm not going to vote for it. But there's no power behind it. So why do you care what the Republicans say when the Democrats that has the power to push it is not even pushing it?
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I'm clear. When the Democrats are in charge, they're supposed to push for reparations. When the Republicans are in charge, they're not supposed to push for reparations. They're never asked when the Democrats are in charge. And when they're in charge of the House, like they are, every off-year election, none of these people come, like Tariq Nasheed don't try to go up to any of these people. Marcel Dixon disappeared off the map. Republicans are in charge. So there's nobody going around. Okay, so what I'm saying is that no one is asking these Republicans to do reparations, but we expect for it to happen only when Democrats are in charge. We never hold the Republicans responsible.
No,
is it? Is it? Okay.
You're creating this false narrative. You have no idea.
It's not a false narrative. It's not a false narrative. Okay.
Politics work. You really have no idea how politics work.
Dana, it's very easy to solve this problem. What Republicans want to vote for reparations? What are there? Where are they? If it's such a false narrative, you should be rattling off names. If you don't have any names, that means it's not their priority. It's that simple. Who are the Republicans that want to vote for reparations?
Tell me this. How many Democrats want to vote for reparations?
Every member of the Congressional Black Caucus has voted.
Bullshit.
Yes.
No, that's not true.
Wow.
So this is why I asked you that question. Wait, one second. This is why I asked you that question, right? Before you could sit up here and twist the arm, but before you could sit up here and twist the arm of the Republicans don't have to consider reparations because it's not an issue. Of course they're going to vote no.
So you don't care.
But they don't care because it's a non-factor.
You're not even holding them to responsibility to vote for it, even when Democrats are in charge, or even when Republicans are in charge.
This is where I'm coming from. I don't give a shit about someone's moral compass because they don't have one. See, this is not about caring or making them care. Forget all that. When it comes to politics, when it comes to actual public policies, you have to understand how it works. You have to understand that you need money to back your cause. You need to organize. When you look at the Black population or Black voters, we don't have the money. We don't have no super PACs. We don't organize. Not even on a local
Wait,
level.
are you serious? We don't organize? Are you serious?
Okay, so then if we did organize, why didn't
You
the
don't consider
reparations
Black
age
voters
of
not
40 bills
organized?
under Obama? Why didn't at least Obama do some type of executive order? Because he did a whole bunch for LGBTQ.
No, he
you can't
did.
do
What
no stuff through
LGBTQ executive order did he? No, he did not.
Joe Biden wrote so many executive orders for every other group except for Black Americans.
Because
you can't
Congress
name
has the power of the purse. How can Joe Biden write an executive
I
order
said
for
an
$30 trillion?
executive order
Come
because
on.
that's the power of the president could write an executive order.
You
What
cannot
executive
write.
order?
You cannot write an executive order. The power of funding is in Congress. Like, you can't write an executive order for $30 trillion. That's insane.
Okay, so he wrote an executive order and he signed it. That tells you
Which
if
one?
it's money,
Which
if
one?
it's money
What's the
allocated,
number?
that means the Democrats and the Republicans voted for money to be allocated in his executive order. And he did
No,
not
that's not.
he did not
Dana,
sign
Dana,
any
which
executive orders
executive-
specifically for Black Americans. Answer my question.
Which-
Did Joe
which
Biden
executive order
sign
are we
an
talking
executive
about?
order
Which
for Black
executive order?
Americans?
No.
Did Joe
Like
Biden
what?
sign an executive order for Black Americans?
That's not how it works. What you're doing
No,
is you're
did he-
obfuscating the issue.
Did he just
And you're
answer the
not
question?
even
Yes or no?
No. Here's the thing. Your answer is no, he didn't. Now, after
Now, how
that,
many
what-
things he signed for LGBTQ?
Dana, the
No,
answer is
answer
no.
that question. Answer that question.
Okay, I
How many
did.
things he
I
signed
did.
for LGBTQ and Asian Americans? How many?
I don't know. That's your
Oh,
question. You have to
dozen.
tell me what your
A
question
dozen,
is. I have
12,
no idea what you're talking about.
A minimum
You have
of
to tell me.
12. A
Tell
minimum
me
of 12.
Actually, Joe
executive
Biden did
order
write an
is it?
executive order for Black people. But anyway,
A minimum of 12. Nothing for Black Americans. But
yes, he did. He did
Native,
write one when he
Asian-
first started about studying systematic racism and its impacts. He did write one when
Excuse
he first got in office. Yes, he did.
Systematic
Go look it up.
racism has nothing to do with Black Americans.
What?
Systematic racism, if you read that executive
Has
order,
nothing to do with Black Americans.
First of all,
Are
when
you
you
serious?
if you read the executive order, it would say probably people of color, LGBTQ, Asian, it's going to include everybody. I said specifically for Black Americans. See,
It don't work like that. It doesn't
Yeah.
work like that.
That's because they have their bills. The COVID-19 is the anti-Asian bill. I read
Okay, Dana.
it's nothing but Asians in it. You have to
Dana,
read this bill.
Dana. What executive order did Donald Trump write exclusively for Black people?
Oh, okay. I'll give you one that he did right. He did write an executive order for HBCUs to receive billions of dollars in funding.
Did they receive those actual funds?
Yes, they did.
They-
Yes,
That
they
was
did.
not a
Receive that
wait.
money.
No, that was not an that was
on
not
top
an
of that,
executive order. That was
It
a
was an
bill.
executive order.
He's the president that allocated the most money ever to
No,
HBCUs.
It's not.
dude. Here, wait.
It's not
Wait.
true.
I've read the
Here's the-
executive order.
It's
You
not an executive order. It is a bill. It was a bill that was passed by, who was sponsored by Alma Adams, who was a Democrat out of North Carolina. Trump signed the
Drop the
bill
link for
after it
it.
was
Wait,
He
passed in
signed it, but
Congress.
he
Hold on.
also
It's
Mike,
not an executive
Mike.
order. That's not an
Mike, drop the
executive
link
order.
for that bill, please. And
Order.
put it on the screen.
Come on, stop.
Please. Drop the link for the bill and put it on the screen so we can see that it was not a Trump executive order.
Well, no, I want to make sure. I want to make sure that we get through the video. I just want to make sure we get through the video. We don't
Why
spend
don't you Google
time.
it and you can read it yourself? Go to the whitehouse.gov. They're all there.
Let me just finish up this video, and then we'll circle back around to that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All things I talked about, the only one that you said you would vote for is Juneteenth. And so if you did a poll of the issues that Black folks care about, where do you line up in the interest of African Americans?
I think if you're talking about what the interests of African Americans lie, the first one is having quality access to education.
Actually, that's not number one.
Actually, can I talk? If you're talking about the issues that actually impact people and families in their community.
No, actually, I'm talking about polling data has been done, and that actually is not number one. The criminal justice reform is number one. So, but go ahead.
Healthcare, education, healthcare, a quality economy, and yes, of course, criminal justice policies. If you actually know my history and my record, when I was in Florida's legislature, I worked on criminal justice policies. It's one of the things I worked on, and I support actually having quality reforms to make sure that our criminal justice system actually recognizes and comes into the 21st century while also making sure that we keep communities safe. That's something that I do believe in. I think that's important to do with respect to what Congress has passed up here. But I would also say that you also can't take the baseline of what this Congress has passed or this Congress has put forward and say, well, you didn't vote on these bills, so now this somehow this is a window into what your ideas are. Because the truth of the matter is there's been no discussion about the measures that have come before Congress. These are things that have gone directly to the floor from the Democrat Party, from the majority party up here on Capitol Hill. So there's been really no discussion. There's been no ability to make amendments. There's been no ability for debate. And so you're asking me to vote yes or no on policy ideas that I disagree with for portions of those policy ideas. And that's the way I vote.
So, but again, when you're talking about, again, speaking to those particular issues, if you poll African Americans in the George Floyd Justice Act, it will poll very, very high. You voted against that. If you poll African Americans on the issue of COVID relief, the bill that was passed will poll very, very high. You voted against that. And so we can go down the line. And so, again, when you're talking about speaking to the interests of African Americans, the Congressional Black Caucus is called the conscience of Congress. Yet you also supported Donald Trump, someone who viciously attacked many members of the Congressional Black Caucus, especially women, never apologized to any of them, and you would support him again. I take it if he ran 2024 that you would actively campaign for Donald Trump and support him?
Again, I'm going to say to make the same point I made earlier. My point and my support.
No, I'm just asking. I'm asking if Donald Trump runs in 2024, would you support and actively campaign for him? Yes or no?
I said earlier, which is already now the tone of this entire interview, and I don't want to get on your interview. How you do it is how you do it.
No. I'm just Congressman. Understand? I'm just asking a series of questions.
Yeah, people can answer simple questions.
Congressman. I'm gonna let you finish. I'm just asking a series of questions to know where you stand. Go ahead.
And let me make my point.
No, go ahead.
Here we go. So all I'm saying is that if you are going to distill down who I am in my entire journey to get to Congress and the thoughts and the ideas and the principles that I do have, to a vote on a series of bills which are highly partisan bills and my support for President Trump, I don't think that's actually a good thing for our politics.
But Congressman, that's not what I did. Congressman, that's not what I did. That's not what I did. Congressman, my audience, here's the deal. Congressman, my audience doesn't know who you are. They don't know who you are. And no, they don't know who you are. I simply brought up, Congressman, I brought up a series of bills that we have talked about on a significant.
Okay.
Go ahead, Moti.
As you can see, as with this conversation, when you're asking a straightforward, direct yes or no question, it always turned into a rambling discussion about a talking point that he made previous in the conversation. He could have just said yes, he's going to vote for him. That's not hard. But at the end of the day, he has to obfuscate the entire conversation. Now everybody's confused about what the question is because he can't answer a straightforward question. It's not hard.
Yeah, let me finish it.
Basis on this show, and I wanted my audience to know exactly how you voted if they're not familiar with you. Go ahead.
Well, Roland, every time I start to make an example, you ask another question. You don't even give me an opportunity.
No, I've actually let you finish a number of questions. I just had another question. Go ahead.
Now, to the question about President Trump, if he ran in 24, would I support him? Yeah, because I'm a Republican. I'm going to support the Republican nominee. I'm going to be out in front to make sure that a Republican takes the White House. But the real question is, why would I do that? Because my viewpoint is, go ahead, put the picture up. My viewpoint is. That's
what we do. It's called a television show. We produce it. So, yeah.
I ain't got no problem with that.
Yeah, so I'm saying, okay, that's what we do. Go ahead.
Finish. My point is that I believe that conservative principles, that limited government, that lower spending from the federal level, that a lower base tax policy that leaves more hands in the hands of more people, especially small business owners, actually promotes an economy that can grow and thrive, where even people who grew up poor like me, they can actually earn more money and have more ladders of opportunity in our economy. I believe that parents should have the same purchasing power poor families as wealthy families do, and that they shouldn't just be put into an educational system because of where they live. I think they should have access to those educational opportunities wherever they may be. And if government funding follows that child, they should do that. I believe that in healthcare, we should have a robust health insurance economy so people can find a policy that suits their needs. Because what happens right now is that when you factor in deductibles and you factor in premiums, people are spending more money just to have the policy itself and don't have the disposable income to fully access the care under the policy. Those are Republican ideals. That's what I support.
Well, actually, to be honest,
I think it would actually be helpful for the Black community, whether they're poor members of the Black community, middle income members of the Black community, upper middle income members of the Black community, or even rich Black people, and that will also be helpful for all of America at the same time.
But the Affordable Care,
the Affordable
Care Act actually played a significant role.
Yeah, I just wanted to address this 2 points real quickly on healthcare and school choice. School choice in charter schools, it's been proven that it doesn't really work. The entire school system is charter in New Orleans. That's one of the things they did after Hurricane Katrina. There's really no measurable improvement in the charter schools. A lot of them are just basically cherry picking talent to try to make, if they do make any sort of scores increase, coupled with there's a lack of funding that's still not really addressed with the charter school model. To the healthcare thing, the fastest way to go bankrupt in this country is to get sick, and a private solution for healthcare, any sort of private solution that Trump still never proposed under his administration, never got a healthcare plan. But any sort of private market-based solution is not going to work because people aren't going to be able to afford it. That's why you have things like Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare for older people, because if there was a private market for older people, it wouldn't exist because people wouldn't be able to afford it.
And it's protected under the Constitution that equal access to quality care under the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. So
Yeah,
That has nothing to do with healthcare. Our Constitution do not guarantee free education, nor does it guarantee free healthcare.
but you have to protect people's
That
human
has
rights.
nothing to do with healthcare.
Go ahead, Emily, go ahead.
No, it's just that the Republicans have never came up with a plan. Dana, what is the Republican plan for healthcare? To replace the Affordable Care Act. What is the Republican healthcare plan to replace the Affordable Care Act?
Probably to go back to what it was before the Affordable Care Act, because the Affordable Care Act fucked up the system. I worked in the healthcare insurance for a healthcare insurance company for 20 years. So I know what happened when Obama had that, when that bill was passed, what they call Obamacare. You know, a whole lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people to this day cannot afford, Obamacare.
No,
they hate it. Majority of people hate that bill. When they're shopping around for a better deal, it's very expensive. They hike up your premiums annually. Your premium rates go up. So it was basically a cluster F. So act like it was such a statement. I would say this. Listen, I would say this. There are always components in a bill that is very helpful, as if you have a pre-existing condition like cancer or something like that, yeah, you won't be denied, because before these insurance companies were basically just denying you if you had cancer or something to that extreme. So as far as Obamacare, it did help with that, regulate that. But as far as pricing, no, it didn't help with regulating the price, and it actually made it worse. And on top of that, Obamacare was a Republican plan. That was a Republican bill. That wasn't his bill. That
it was a Republican bill
to try to overturn it.
That was a Republican bill that he was. I forgot the Republican in the Senate and Congress name that created that bill. And then when Obama became president, he used that bill, put his name on it, and of course all the Democrats signed off on it. But that whole construct of that bill was a Republican's ideology. Yes.
No, it wasn't. Why are so many?
Why did they vote to try to overturn it?
I don't remember the Republican name. Wait, slow down. I don't remember the Republican name, but I am going to cite Judge Joe Brown because he told me the name and he broke it down where that bill came from, who constructed that bill. There was a Republican. I think he was a Republican out of Tennessee. So that was a Republican. What we call Obamacare was a Republican's bill. It was created by a
No,
Republican.
it was based on Romney's bill in Massachusetts, and it was mainly
No,
the
it was
individual.
not, but yes,
It was the individual mandate.
Mitt
That was the
Romney's
part
a
that was based on a
Republican.
Republican. That was
Mitt
it.
Romney is a Republican, but it's not based on Mitt Romney's bill, even though it's similar.
It
But
is.
Mitt
It's
Romney
totally his
is.
plan.
But
It's
isn't
totally his plan.
Mitt Romney is a damn Republican.
They called it Romney Care.
Yes.
They called it before Obamacare even existed.
The entire
Massachusetts
bill
by
was not.
a Republican. So the
The
other Republican out of Tennessee, he took points from Romney Care, added some other shit in there, and then Obama put his name on it. And when he was president, he got the shit passed through. So that was a bipartisan bill.
It was not a bipartisan bill.
Yes,
Stop it.
Acting like these goddamn Democrats do so much for the goddamn country, because they don't.
It was a party line vote in
You
both
keep
the
acting like
House
the
and the
Republicans
Senate.
do anything, but you don't
No,
hold
no,
it to
no,
any type of
MOT.
account.
It's not a
MOT,
You don't hold
Obama-
them to account.
I don't give a shit about neither party. See,
No,
that's
MOT,
Well,
Obama.
It's not about either.
But you came up here to argue against one specific party, though, Dana. You give a damn. You give a damn. Trust me.
What I did was I saw Roland Martin, and he's one of the lowest of these boule people. So I can't really stand Roland Martin and his stupid talking points.
Why?
And
Why?
Byron, at least with what's his name, Byron Donalds, you know what I'm saying? At least he stands on what he says. He's not bad. He's like, no, I won't open.
You stand on what he says by not voting for anything that you would like.
Let me.
You know what the Democrats do? They tell you, oh my God, Trump is a racist. Oh my God, voter suppression. Why do I give a shit if somebody is a racist? Why?
Wait, Mike, before you finish, let me say one thing about
freedom here in America.
About Obamacare. Obamacare expanded access for African Americans. I believe it's 2.5 million African Americans gained insurance as a result of it, and actually life expectancy actually went up for African Americans as well. Just want to throw that out there before you start.
Show me now. Pull up the numbers of the premiums when people first signed up and what they're paying now. And this, I'm talking about overall. So your numbers are correct. A lot of people gained access because they were denied before. The insurance companies, they're worse than a pharmaceutical. The insurance companies are the ones regulating pharma. They're worse than Congress. So this Obama, yes, it helped a lot of people who were not eligible for health insurance to get it. Now, do those same people still have it? What do those numbers look like today?
Yeah, but you're still trying to obfuscate the issue. Where's the Republican plan? Where's your Republican plan? You can't focus on what the Democrats are doing.
Let Mike finish.
Yeah, they came up. They had some plan. They wanted to reconstruct the Obamacare, and I guess either reverse it to back what it was or take some shit out. So it wasn't like, oh, we want to completely get rid of it, because that was a bipartisan bill. I think there's just some stuff they wanted to take out. But you act like that was a Democratic bill. That was a bipartisan bill.
Can we let Mike finish?
Yeah, I just want to finish this up real quick. 10 minutes left.
Role in decreasing the number of African Americans who had no access to health care. Second of all, that was actually a Republican plan because it came from Mitt Romney out of Massachusetts. And thirdly, Donald Trump had 4 years and not one time to even present even remotely a health care plan. And not only that, let's just also be clear. Donald Trump loves to play footsie with white supremacists. So you, after what we experienced for 4 years, you would welcome having that back in the White House. You can be Republican. A lot of Republicans out there who are Republicans, hardcore Republicans, but who did not support that man. But you would willingly stand behind him after what all he did for 4 years, including the newest revelations regarding getting the access to phone records of Democrats, even his own White House lawyer. You would want that back in the White House?
First of all, let me say, whatever Mitt Romney passed in Massachusetts is not conservative policy. Just because Mitt did it doesn't mean that I was.
But Mitt's a Republican.
Conservative.
What was it? Not conservative policy.
Because it was bad policy in Massachusetts and it's bad policy for the country.
But you just said that you would support Donald.
That's not true. Massachusetts has 97 to 98% of its residents covered in. In healthcare coverage right now, the highest in the country.
Trump because he's a Republican. He would be the Republican nominee, but Mitt's a Republican. So you support some Republicans, not all.
I said I let you speak. Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
I support conservative ideals. Just because a Republican puts something up, if it's not conservative, I'm not going to support it because it has to matter. It has to align itself with the principles that I just outlined about 30 seconds to a minute ago. The second thing I will tell you is this. What I fully support is an economy that grows and thrives, where income levels for all socioeconomic groups can actually rise, for all ethnicity groups can actually rise. What I do support is not having an economy that should be basically racing out of the gates, but is actually being stalled out because of massive overspending, talking about the COVID relief bill, that was not needed, that is actually holding our small businesses back. And our small business owners are white, Black, and Hispanic. They're across the spectrum in our United States. So I support an economy and policies that come from elected officials that are going to allow for all of us to thrive and not get caught up in these ideological arguments of, well, we believe higher taxes and more regulation work, when we already know you take more business out of you take more money out of small business. Who does that really hurt? It's not going to hurt rich people. It's going to hurt middle income people and poor people who work for said small businesses. It does it every single time.
Well, I'll tell you what's actually hurting small businesses and poor folks. When you have the rich in this country not paying their fair share, the ProPublica stories breaks that down. So I would love to see Republicans actually. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna finish and let you finish. I would love to see Republicans fully fund the IRS so they're not auditing folks who are in the middle class, but they're actually auditing the super rich in this country. Even they admit they don't have the funds because they've been cut by Republicans. But Republicans have cut their funds and not allowed them to do their job. Be nice if that happens.
Let me ask you this question.
Would you support that?
Hold on. Do you know when the most tax revenue was ever raised in the history of the United States, adjusted for inflation?
Tell us when.
It happened in 2018 and 2019. I sit on the budget committee, so I know the facts. The facts are the most tax revenue ever in the history of our country, both in dollar amount and as a percentage of the economy, happened in 2018 and 2019.
Did the deficit, you sit on the budget committee?
Hold on.
No. Since you sit on the budget committee, did the deficit under Trump increase in those same years?
I said 2018 and 2019. I didn't even raise the name of whose president was.
No, I'm asking. Did the federal deficit increase in 2018 and 2019?
They did, but I'm talking about tax policy. That's your question. You're talking about tax policy, right?
But the tax policy, that tax cut actually contributed to the deficit increasing. And I thought Republicans are fiscal conservatives.
Oh, but that's not true. That's not true, and you know that because. And here's the deal.
Are you serious?
Hold on. Oh, I'm very serious because.
Oh, hold on. I just want to be clear. You're saying that the tax cut, the $1 trillion tax cut, did not increase the federal deficit. You said that that's not true.
I'm gonna make my point to you.
Go ahead.
If you look at what the estimates for what tax revenue were from the Congressional Budget Office under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act versus what tax revenue actually was from under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, the federal government raised more money in revenue than CBO projected. So if you're going to project that tax revenue is going to be $2 billion, for argument's sake, and tax revenue is actually $2.5 billion, how is that a cut? Can you explain that to me? How does that add to the deficit when you bring more money in than you expect it to?
This is a piece right here. A couple of things I want to show you that I think is critically important, where the folks at Forbes, not the most liberal publication, talked about the federal deficit and how the Trump's tax cuts did lead to an increase in the federal deficit. But also, when you mention the issue about conservative and the Affordable Care Act, this is what Forbes also said on more than one occasion. President Obama has said the core idea behind Obamacare came from the Heritage Foundation, and PolitiFact raised the claim as mostly true. Heritage Foundation ain't the most moderate group. That's a very conservative foundation. And so looks like Democrats also took a Republican idea and made the Affordable Care Act. So it's kind of conservative.
Like I told you before, just because somebody puts their name on it from my side of the aisle doesn't mean I'm going to support it. No, Con. What you said is, just because a Republican put their name on it, I'm not going to support it. You said, but I am a conservative. The Heritage Foundation is also a very right conservative foundation, right? I don't agree with the policy because I've actually worked in insurance for my career of 17 years, finance, banking, and financial services and insurance. And if you run an insurance market that way, what you're going to have is what we do have. You're going to have policies and premiums that are too high for a lot of people to afford.
So where's the Republican health plan? Where is it?
Let me just finish it.
No, I'm just asking, where is it? I've been looking for it.
And then what you have is you have people who are trying to get the same insurance. They don't have the ability to afford it, so government has to come in with subsidies. When government comes in with subsidies, those are the things that actually add to the deficits that you were so concerned about from under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act.
Also, this is again from the folks at Bloomberg who laid this out, that the Trump tax cuts did take a bite out of revenue in this country, and that it said in the 2 years since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 took effect on January 1st, 2018, the annual U.S. federal deficit has grown from $681 billion to a bit over $1 trillion, according to the Treasury Department. But those are the numbers there. Here's the deal here. I still would like to know, again, when you talk about being a part of the CBC, we'll see what they say. But what my audience is also asking here is they want to know specifically, not broad education, this, they would know. They would know specifically what things that you will support that specifically has a direct impact on the Black community. That's one of the things that they also want to know.
If you're talking about police reform, criminal justice reform, healthcare, education policy, all those things have impacts on the Black community. And the policies I support, reforms that actually unleash education, unleash healthcare to be more vibrant, to have far more options, far more choices, and actually help Black families, or frankly any family for that matter, with respect to education specifically, have the purchasing power to go and find the environment that best suits their kids. If that doesn't help improve the lives of Black families, it most certainly does, because when you give a family a choice, or let alone a Black family a choice, where they can actually find the environment that best suits the needs of their children, that's going to help their children thrive and succeed. And I know you and I both want that.
Well, first of all, I'm somebody who co-founded School Choice is the Black Choice. That's not an issue for me. But what I also understand is that one of the fundamental problems that I do have with Republicans when it comes to education is what I'm seeing when it comes to textbooks, when it comes to this ridiculous thing they're doing, the attack on critical race theory. That's not even being taught in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. It makes no sense. Even the bill that was passed in your state made no sense whatsoever, because critical race theory is not taught in Florida schools. But again, we know critical race theory has become the boogeyman for all issues dealing with race in education. And so, yeah, I got a whole bunch of issues when it comes to the Republican Party on education. And let's be real clear, I've also been very critical of Democrats when it comes to the issue of charter schools, magnet schools, school choice as well. And so, frankly, I think in a lot of ways, both parties are full of shit when it comes to education, and they really don't care about the people, their agendas. You have the right who wants to take down teachers' unions. And then, of course, you have the left who wants to support them. But it all comes down to what's right for the child. And I'm not sure that people are real about that. Well, Congressman Donalds, glad to have you on the show. Certainly welcome you back again. Unfortunately, a lot of your white colleagues are too scared to come talk to Black-owned media. I've offered a platform for more than a decade. Very, very few have actually accepted the opportunity. And so we'll see if they want to actually communicate with Black folks and listen to them, they might want to come talk to Black-owned media.
Listen, it was my pleasure to be here with you. Been watching you for a while, so I know you've been following a little bit of your career. It's my pleasure to be on. I know I'll be back on in the future.
All right, thanks a bunch. We appreciate it.
All right, you take it easy.
All right.
That's the only one thing I agree with Roland when he said that both parties are full of shit.
Oh, okay. So,
Mike, I dropped a few links in the chat if you want to bring those up about like the deficit, healthcare, the healthcare vote, if you have a chance.
Where do you want to start from? Where do you guys want to start from? Let's start with Dana. She had some numbers, she had some data,
I just dropped a link for all the executive orders, Biden, and then you also could click on it. Click on from all other presidents, Trump, Obama, and stuff like that. But overall, I think, honestly, me personally, people are too focused on federal and not on their state, local legislation, because that's what's going to affect you first and most.
Mhm.
That's what the focus is, because when you focus locally, then you're going to see the change in Congress and in the White House. And then too, I do appreciate what was Byron Donald said. He's like, listen, I don't agree with everyone on my side of the aisle. And why should you? We already saw what happened January the 1st when they was trying to pick the speaker, and those 11 to 12 Republicans told the line and said, we're not going to vote you in until our demands are met. And that's how you do politics. That's how you hold out. That's how you see results. So you're
But
not.
what have they?
Wait, I have
But
a
what?
question.
What have they
Wait,
gotten
hold
as a
on.
result? What has happened as a result of that?
I'm pretty sure they got whatever funding or
No.
wanted
No,
passed.
what did they get? You said that's how you do politics. What did they get for all of that?
Whatever they discussed behind closed doors that we don't know, that they wanted done.
Like,
They voted. They ended up voting for him. Which when they
what did
had
they get?
what was that, a week. We don't know, and we're never going to know what they wanted because those talks were behind closed doors. Do
So
you really think that
when are we going to know what they
exactly
got?
what these people talk about behind closed doors? No,
What-
we would never know.
What did they get? What
I don't know what they got, but whatever demands that they want were met because they voted McCarthy in. But they
or they could have
basically
just
said,
folded.
you're not.
Okay,
You're
Dana,
not.
couldn't they have just folded to the pressure too? If you don't know what they got,
No, and I don't know who you are, but no, but I think you're not delusional, but you need to have a clear understanding.
I'm asking you what they got.
What we see
What
on
did they
TV,
get?
what we see on TV is so fake. And we should know this being on YouTube. What those 11 Republicans that said to their Republican person that's supposed to be speaker, they're supposed to be voting for speaker. They said, we're not going to vote for your white ass. We're not voting for you because of whatever. And then they kept going behind closed doors. So those
Yeah, but I can
people
tell you
were
what they got.
asking for something, whether it's for
Yes.
their own personal pockets or whether it's from their district. And he probably didn't want to give it to them.
But we'll never
And
know what it
eventually
is.
they got what they wanted because they voted him in.
No, I mean, but there's some public things that they did get, though. They got the ability to challenge him to vote him out of the speakership whenever they want to, which means they now control the actual position. This is why you got all these phony investigations. But Dana, I have a question because you just made a statement that's very clear. You say to focus on local politics, and that's how you get things done on the national level, correct?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you live in a Democrat or a Republican area?
Now Republican, before all my life Democrat.
Okay, so what are the Republicans organizing for on the local level that is going to help Black people?
Well, where I live at now, I just got here, so I'm not even registered in this
I
particular.
mean, but you would have to
state.
know that there's something you have to bring up. I mean, you just can't.
Well,
every time I ask
first of all, I need you to wait, slow down,
It's
because
gaslighting is what it is. It's gaslighting.
because what you're saying is, listen, I just got here yesterday. So I come from a city that I'm still a resident in, that I'm still registered, but I switched to the Republican, and that was for local reasons, right? Very local, that every city and state don't have, which is why I switched to Republicans, but that's neither here or there. But where I came from, the state of New Jersey, the Republicans and the Democrats, they don't do anything for anyone if you're not putting the pressure behind them, if you're not coming to them with an agenda, if you're not demanding anything. That I know for sure. If Black people lived in a Republican area, because if you notice throughout this nation, majority of the Black population live in a Democratic area, and that was strategically done. But if you live
Are you talking about state or local? Or they're local?
Yes, that's state is local, state and
no,
local.
I disagree. The majority of Black people live in the deep
Georgia.
South.
Just take Georgia. Where do the majority of Black people live at in Georgia? Is it Republican or Democrat?
At the state level, it's Republican. Republicans control the state house.
Black
They have a
people,
Republican government.
No. I said where do the majority of Black people live at? Is it a Democratic district?
Yeah, Black people live in a Democratic district.
That's
at
what I
that
just
level.
said.
That's what I was asking you about
Lisa
the
Lake,
state
Mike.
level.
That's what I just said, Mike. That's what I just said. So in the state of New Jersey, if Black people lived in a Republican district, then you go to your Republican district leader or politician or whoever, and you tell them these are our demands.
But why doesn't it work at
wait
the
a minute,
state level
let
then?
me finish. If you come in with an agenda with demands, they have no choice but to adhere to it. But the problem is Black people are not doing that. They're not even doing it in a Democratic district. Only thing Black people do is go to the polls and vote. That's not participating in politics.
That is,
Go ahead, Renaissance, please.
no, I just wanted to point out that I don't see how that works in a state level when you look at like state houses that are controlled by Republicans like Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, all of those. I don't see how, first of all, there are people going and pushing, like if you look at things like criminal justice reform at that level, which that's one of the things that Republicans talked about so much at the federal level, but they control the majority of state houses and governorships in America. So, and that's where the majority of people who are incarcerated are. So there are different initiatives that are being pushed at the state level. It's Republicans don't want to sign off on them because most Black people in the South live in a Republican controlled state.
Well, okay, so this is the thing, right? I'm Northeast and be a little bit more specific, tri-state, right? So I'm 30 minutes outside of New York. And what if you're saying that Republicans in the South, and the politics in the South is different in the North, but if you're saying that Republicans in the South, like they don't support or pass initiatives for police reform or the criminal justice system, right?
They don't.
Right, and I'm not disagreeing with you on that. But what I'm saying is where I'm coming from a heavy Democratic controlled state, county, city, it's the same thing. But they pretend they're doing something and they never do. So there are more people that are being incarcerated, right? In the state of New Jersey, Black bodies, and you have a very strong Democratic presence. The same people that go to Congress to try and push and vote for these criminal justice reform. But then when you start pulling back the curtains and looking at what they're doing in their state, they're not doing it.
Okay, well,
Okay,
we have a bill up there. We have a bill up there. What is the Republican bill for criminal justice reform? What's the Republican bill?
For what? What do you mean? A Republican where? On Congress?
Yes, Congress.
I don't know. You tell me. Do you know? I don't know. You tell me.
I mean, it's my question for you. You don't.
I'm asking. I just said I don't know. So you tell me.
Okay, they don't have one.
And then
just like they don't have one for healthcare.
They don't have one. So who has one?
Yes.
Who has one?
Well, the Democrats have one, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which that guy said he was going to vote against. Yes, I have.
What did it say? Where was the money being
allocated?
No, we're not going to.
No, we're not doing that.
Let's talk about the George
Yeah. We're not doing that.
Hold on, chaos coming in like
that money. You know what's funny?
You just asked me if I read it. I say yes. And he was like, "What's in it?" And I'm like, "What? Your side didn't vote for it." That's the point. You don't
my side. Stop doing that. Stop saying my side. I'm not on a side. Stop doing that.
Okay.
So I want to quickly say
the George Floyd bill, when I read it, that money is being allocated to the police department.
No, it is not. No,
yes,
what is I'll tell you what's in the bill. What's in the bill, and then I'll let Shonda go because she wants to speak. What is in the bill is it wants to create a federal database for basically tracking officers. So right now, what you're having is police officers can basically get fired from a department.
Did you drop that link in the chat, Renaissance, so I can pull it up?
What, on the George Floyd one?
Right now.
Yeah.
No, but I can't. But I'll quickly say this: it does that. It tries to, I believe, create a federal standard for use of force, as well as for crime collection, as well as I believe it bans all chokeholds across departments. And then I'm missing one thing. Qualified immunity. That was one of the big sticking points of the bill, is that it would eliminate qualified immunity.
What does the bill say?
I just
because the bills. But how much money were they allocated towards the police department?
You see how you just galloping through the whole conversation? Like you can't keep
because MOT, you bringing up, you keep saying your people. Because what? Because I'm
You're on the Republican side. You came up here to complain about Democrats.
If the Republicans don't have a bill, right, and the Democrats have this George Floyd bill, and this is what I'm trying to explain to you, being a Democrat for all my life up until recently, Yeah, they have that bill, but when you start reading these bills and going into details of where the money is allocated, the money is allocated to the same industry, to the same department that they're trying to say that is doing us harm. So why are you funding? You're funding the same system that is doing us the harm. And that's what I'm saying, the hypocrisy.
Wow.
At least the Republicans are saying, well, we're not creating no bill. The Democrats saying we're creating a bill, but we're going to keep funding.
So-
That's why I keep
Shonda,
saying
want-
that you're
want
on the
to defund
Republican
the-
side. though.
imprisoning
That's why I'm
black
saying
people.
that.
Wait, so Dana, you want to defund the police then? Is that what you're saying?
Defund. No, I want the police to be funded.
You're saying that the George Ford bill is giving money to the police, but so you're saying that's a bad thing?
Right. They're giving.
So you want to defund them?
When we look at the news, when we look at a Roland Martin, and then when we look at the Congressional Black Caucus, they're saying defund. Okay, well, why in this George Ford bill are you funding the police if you want to defund them?
Well, because they don't want to defund. But anyway.
Yeah, I got the bill up on the
It's
screen.
reallocation
They
of
want to
funds.
fund them so that they can keep black bodies in prison.
Dana,
It's a
it's a
business.
reallocation of funds and priority. It's called defund, but it's reallocation of funds.
But you're reallocating to the same department that is imprisoning
No.
black bodies.
Why can't
Yeah,
she
but
read
we
the
were-
bill if she has all these questions? The bill is up.
Okay, I got the bill up. Dana, if you want to read it, or would you like me to read it? What's your preference here?
You click the link that I put in there. Go ahead. Because it's
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep. All right, HR 1280, George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2021. The bill addresses a wide range of policies and issues regarding policing practices and law enforcement accountability. It increases accountability for law enforcement misconduct, restricts the use of certain policing practices, enhances transparency in data collection, and establishes best practices and training requirements. The bill enhances existing enforcement mechanisms to remedy violations by law enforcement. Among other things, it does the following. It lowers the criminal intent standard from willful to knowing or reckless to convict a law enforcement officer for misconduct in a federal prosecution.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Can you go all the way down to section 116, authorization of appropriations? Because we're talking about the money. So all that other stuff up there, that's cute, but
I don't.
That's literally the summary of the bill.
no, but let's go to the money. Because bills are about money, allocating money out.
I just want to finish reading what's on screen, because that's what was brought up. Limits qualified immunity as a defense to liability in a private civil action against a law enforcement officer, and grants administrative subpoena power to the Department of Justice in pattern or practice investigations. It establishes a framework to prevent and remedy racial profiling by law enforcement at the federal, state, and local levels. It also limits the unnecessary use of force and restricts the use of no-knock warrants, chokeholds, and carotid holds. The bill creates a national registry, the National Police Misconduct Registry, to compile data on complaints and records records of police misconduct. It also establishes new reporting requirements, including the use of force, officer misconduct, and routine policing practices, stops and searches. Finally, it directs DOJ, Department of Justice, to create uniform accreditation standards for law enforcement agencies and requires law enforcement officers to complete training on racial profiling, implicit bias, and the duty to intervene when other officers uses of excessive force. Where Dana, you said that there's an area where there's supposed to be some money discussed. Do you?
If she said 0.116 or something to that effect.
0.116?
No, section 116.
There we go.
Every bill is money allocated out. So funding.
Okay, so before we look at the actual allocation of funds, what is your concern about the allocation of funds?
Well, where they're allocating the money to. So a lot of things that you just read in a summary, not all, but some of the things, particularly in New York and in New Jersey, that was already an option for people to file a complaint against police officers. However, I know in the state
It
of
was,
New Jersey,
yeah,
because
it's creating a
because this
federal
is the
registry
federal,
to track them, not
right, this
file a
is
complaint.
federal. This is federal. And in the beginning of this conversation, when I said what's most important is local.
I
So
want to ask
a lot
Dan a
of times
question
you
after
could-
this.
a lot of
No.
times, you could wipe your ass with a federal bill, because when I'm in my state, you know what I'm saying, that's the state law is totally different.
No,
So
the whole point of a federal bill in this case for the registry is so everyone across state lines can see if a police officer leaves this department and tries to join another one, you now have access to that data where you didn't before. So it's different from just like what you have at your local level. It's creating a network where people can use it across state lines.
right, okay. But in the meantime, in your state, what laws are being passed to protect its citizens? Civilian committees in the state of New Jersey have been trying to get passed for over a decade. That keeps being blocked by Republicans and Democrats. So on a
What?
federal level, sounds good, but on a state level, something else is happening where this bill, even if this bill was passed, it's not going to help you on a state level because your state have different laws.
The state law can't trump federal law.
But the federal government can't
In
come into
any
a state and
state,
tell a state what
In
to
any
do.
state law has to be in accordance with federal law. That has been,
No, they do not, because the state is a
Yes.
sovereign. A
No,
federal, you
it
have
is
to have
called
a reason.
it's called the supremacy clause.
You
Federal
have to
law
have
will
a
always trump
reason.
state law.
You have to have a reason on a federal level to go and try to tell a state what to do. You just can't go in and tell them what to do. Now, in the state of New Jersey, they got rid of the bail bond system. Crime went up. Why would you get rid of the bail bond system? Because that was part of that defund the police. But that's another trick bag, because you got rid of the bail bonds, crime is going up. You knew crime was going to go up. And then the reason why you wanted crime to go up, because those same criminals you arrested and let go, you give them a court date, you know they're not going to show up. So now you send the sheriff out for a search warrant to arrest them forcefully. So that keeps the people circling in and out of the system.
All right, MOT, you had something you want to bring up?
And how is that George Floyd bill going to remedy that?
Mhm.
So now you want the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to address the crime.
No, I'm
going up with
asking the
statewide
question.
bills.
I don't give a damn about this bill because
I know.
it's not
I'm
fixing the
re-clarifying your
problems that's
question.
happening in the state
to-
of New
to make
Jersey
sure that
criminal
we're-
justice
we're-
system.
Okay, so okay, so now you want the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to specifically combat the rise in crime. I'm making sure I'm getting that right. That's what you want?
Oh, I'm sorry. What is that bill supposed to do?
No, I'm asking a question to make sure that I am getting
That's
what
part
you're
of this
asking.
bill. That's what it should be doing.
Mhm.
Okay, so where's the conservative bill about doing exactly what you would like them to do? Where's the conservative bill?
Oh, I'm sorry. In the state of New Jersey, the Republicans didn't want to get rid of the bail bond system. And if they did, it's only because they knew if they privately was investing in the prison system, they'll make more money. So they're not going to create a bill to get rid of certain things that's already in place. The Democrats do that.
Yeah, I think what MOT is asking is which elected official in the House or the Senate in the Republican Party has drafted an alternative bill.
And Congress, I don't think none of them have.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to hold the Democrats for solving all of these problems, but when we ask what the Republicans do, you have no answer, and you're not
Wrong,
worried about
MOT.
the answer.
You're wrong, because I never said that. I never said the Democrats should be solving nobody problem. Where you get that
Okay,
from? The Democrats
all right.
come up
That's the
where I'm
summation.
coming from.
That-
Where I'm coming from, what I've been explaining this whole time is when the Democrats come up with these quote unquote solutions, they're not
Mhm.
really solutions. It's actually
Okay.
harming Black people. to a
Okay, if it's harming Black people, how come they're not conservatives creating bills so that way Black people are not harmed?
Do they
For
have
life.
to? Because you look at their district. Do the people, they are voted in by the people who, the state and district where they come from. So those are
Mhm.
people they have to listen to. So do they have to create a bill similar to George Floyd that's going to benefit their district?
Yes.
They do.
They
So
absolutely
what are the
should. Yes.
statistics shows that? What statistic shows that?
But see, what you want to do is you want to come here and throw dirt all on the Democrats. But when we ask you specifically about what Republicans are
I'm
doing,
throwing dirt on
nothing.
both of them.
But
The fact is that the Democrats, because I've been a lifelong Democrat, I know they're just as bad, if not, I'm gonna say worse than the Republicans. Yeah, they're worse than the Republicans. I will say that.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
right,
I mean, Joe Manchin is a lifelong Democrat too, and we can see his track record too. I want to go to Shonda because she had something she wanted to add
sorry.
Yeah, as someone who works in healthcare, she wanted to add something to the conversation about healthcare coverage. Shonda, do you have anything you want to add?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mike and the Black Rain Trust, for allowing me to come up. I'm not going to be up here long. I was listening in. Interesting conversation. But I just heard a lot of misinformation or conflating of points, and I wanted to try to bring a more objective aspect to some of the topics that were discussed, particularly in regards to the Affordable Care Act. Let me know if you all are having trouble hearing me. There was a statement made by Dana respectfully earlier that the Affordable Care Act increased healthcare cost. I will question that because I dropped a couple of links in the chat in regards to before the Affordable Care Act came into existence in 2010. It was not a perfect bill. However, it did open access not only for African Americans, but for a number of Americans in the country who did not have access to care. Prior to the Affordable Care Act, and you still see this now since the Affordable Care Act has been in existence, particularly for individuals who did not have insurance or were underinsured, they would access the emergency department for healthcare services instead of seeking the care of a primary care physician or a charity clinic or something along that line. If you look at average costs for ER, and I did drop an article in the chat. I should ask first, Mike, my apologies. In regards to that, your average cost to go to ER, particularly if it's not an emergency, but even when it is at least around $1,200 plus. Because the goal of the ER is to make sure that there's nothing going on with that individual that can lead them to have a demise or some, detrimental health event if they were to leave the premises. Compared to the Affordable Care Act, one of the reasons why some of the costs is not optimal based on what it could have been is because the GOP voted down the universal payer system. I didn't hear that come up from Dana in the previous discussion of this topic. And if we're going to have an objective conversation, then we need to bring out all of the facts. Another reason why some of the healthcare costs increased, and again, it's not a perfect bill, but if it increased access for people who were denied for decades, then I think that needs to be applauded. But in some states, you have where the Medicaid and Medicare expansion was denied, like in Texas. Texas did not take the Medicare expansion in 2012 that Obama tried to extend, which means for low-income individuals, either they're denied access to care or they have to pay a higher cost for healthcare services. I think that's something that we need to factor in. So that was one of the points. The other point is, and I respect everyone's view, I don't have to agree. If we're going to talk about one side, or throw darts at one side, I don't have a preference on who you vote for. That's your own individual's decision. Then if we're going to have a truly adult, mature, genuine conversation, we need to look at all aspects. I just have an issue off of principle hearing, the Dems are doing this, the Dems are doing that, when an individual is not looking at it objectively on what's being blocked. I did not hear the term filibuster come up. And one of the reasons why a lot of these bills have gotten blocked or they haven't gotten out of committee or gotten passed when they do have support is because of the filibuster. So I think that's something that needs to be brought into the conversation as well.
There's some great points. You went very detailed about the Affordable Care Act. You were right. But at the same time, I worked in specifically health insurance company for the state of New Jersey, and you specifically talked about the state of Texas. So every state especially when the Affordable Care Act came into effect, went by it differently. So if the state of Texas was having an issue with Medicare, Medicaid, then yeah, that's something that the people, the residents in that state has to deal with, who they voting in, and look at, okay, whether it's Republican or Democrat, how are you voting on these issues? In the state of New Jersey, it's totally different, the healthcare, than it may be from Texas. So, and I'm coming from a point of view of a state. Everybody's state has different laws and legislation. Every state don't operate the same. So with this, but overall, and I'm generalizing this affordable care, yes, a lot of people who did not have access were able to have access to healthcare, which is why a lot of health insurance companies had a problem with that, because they're looking at it, well, are we still going to turn a profit, a high profit? But the fact is that, okay, when it was passed, the numbers of people, like you just said, that were able to have access to health insurance. But now when I hear people, because I always had private. So now when I hear people who didn't have it and they signed up for Obamacare, and I'm speaking to them today, what would that be? Almost 10 years later, a decade later, they hate it because they're paying more money, getting less access, or less access to care, because now the insurance company is saying, yeah, we'll cover you, but we're only going to pay for you to get, let's say, an exam on this once every 2 years, or you get, we'll pay for this blood work, but not that blood work. We'll cover this prescription, but not that prescription. So, and what the health insurance is saying that they're doing is cost-effective healthcare. In other words, it's saying that let me finish. In other words, the health insurance companies are saying, we're not going to pay for a lot of stuff that we paid for before, because there's more people that's getting healthcare, that's getting insurance at a lower rate. The premiums are lower than before. So I'm not going to sit up here and cover a whole bunch of other services. So that honestly, we're focusing on Congress, to where what I'm saying is you have to then focus on the private sector, the health insurance companies that are really controlling what's get paid, what is not, what is being denied, and what is not. And they're also controlling the cost on pharma, on big pharma. So
I got a question.
May I respond to that?
And one more thing, because you mentioned a filibuster. The filibuster is used by Republicans and Democrats. Now the Democrats, Biden administration, let's get rid of it. But when Trump was in office, you wanted to keep it. That's just a con game that both sides play with the filibuster.
I just dropped a link in the chat showing how Obamacare is literally polled as more popular than ever. I don't see how people who didn't have healthcare before would be unhappy with Obamacare now. That doesn't make
everybody I talk to, and my mother, for instance, who is now retired, they don't. A lot of older people do not like.
She would be on. That would be.
She should be on Medicare.
She would be on
Medicare. She would qualify for Medicare.
One example. That's one example, because what we're talking about right now, we're generalizing this whole conversation. But when you go where you live at, going back to the local, and you actually talk to people now, go and talk to them and say, well, how do you feel about Obamacare since when you first applied for it, and see what they tell you. If you're not talking to the people, then this whole conversation is a high. It's a super surface.
That's why I just dropped an article with a poll in the chat. Like, a poll is much more a better gauge than me just going to talk to people, which all sorts of bias is involved.
No, it's not. Those numbers could be skewed. Please don't play with me.
Oh wow! So it's better for me to just. It's better for me to just go ask random people than it is to pull a poll.
That just came up here, and she went in details about, the changes and the access that people had to. And I'm not arguing that, because she's absolutely right. But then there's always a con to everything. That's what I'm saying. So don't I'm just saying, don't sit up here and act like it's some utopia with the Obamacare, because
I
it
didn't say it
wasn't.
was a utopia. I
Neither
said
did
look
I.
at
Okay, so
Neither
I have
did
a question. All right,
Today,
I have a
it's
question.
about, are we going to turn a profit? This is still a capitalist nation. It's about
I don't care
money.
about insurance companies. I don't care about insurance companies
Well,
making a
you
profit.
should.
No, I don't. Because insurance
But you
companies don't
should.
provide
That's
health
what I'm
care.
saying. You
Hospitals do.
should.
I
No,
cannot in
it's
good
not that.
conscience
And this is,
be
and
on the
this is,
side of
this is why
insurance
I'm like, this is the
companies.
first time me and MLT is really going back and forth and disagreeing, because I don't understand why you would say that, because the insurance companies, they don't pay state taxes for their buildings, you know, for their corporations. They're getting so many grant money from the state, but you're sitting up here, you're not covering a lot of things that people need to be covered. So you should
Okay.
see how they're regulating their service.
Yeah, well, full disclosure, I get free health care through the VA. This is why I don't understand
oh my
or care
God.
about insurance companies.
I swear to
No.
God.
I have health care through the Aurora, Colorado VA, the largest and most well-respected VA in the country. It is the size of a city block. It is the biggest, well, outside of Walter Reed, it is one of the best places to get health care in the country, which is why I live there. So
But
I don't
that's
understand what-
military. Isn't that federal? That's, you know what I'm saying? But those are federal, that's federal money. And I'm sorry, the VA I hear the VA has a lot of issues too. So in
conservative
your
states,
state,
in
wait a minute.
conservative
you
states.
exactly. Thank you. Because you said that's
Yeah, but
why
I don't live in a
Colorado,
conservative state.
which is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about why it's important to do where you live at locally, because like you said, you live in Colorado for that's one of the reasons why you're there. Now you go to a state where the VA is a piece of shit.
Tennessee,
Well,
Mississippi, Arkansas.
Mike,
I've been
just let
to
me
these
know when I
VAs.
can.
So what's more important, your state legislation or the federal?
Those are Republican-run legislatures. Of
they're
course
both
they're not
important
gonna,
because you get
administer- yeah.
Level.
they're both, you get unfunded mandates that come from the federal level. Lots of money comes from the federal level. They're both important.
I
They
don't know.
both have effects.
We're just going to agree to disagree, because
Okay.
we're talking about state. I'm talking about a state level. Voting on a state, not federal. It's just two
You're
different things.
conflating points, which is a problem.
Doing what?
Mike, may I speak?
yeah, go right ahead, please.
So respectfully, Dana, you're conflating points. You're going back between state and federal.
No, I'm not. I'm
Yes,
being
you
very
are.
specific. I was
No,
very
you're going back
specific about this
between-
whole show. So please
My-
don't put words in my mouth.
Well,
I
you put
said
words in
it's
mine.
important to focus on local. Local affects you the most and first. I accept that.
Please go ahead, Sean.
Both are important, but to clarify what was stated earlier, because again, I hear conflating of points, and maybe my interpretation is wrong, but that's what I'm hearing. In regards to the insurance topic, there's a reason why things are priced the way that they are. There was mention of healthcare companies as well as pharma. Who is in bed with these companies and these health insurance companies and these pharmaceutical companies that are making these adjustments? It's the politicians and the lobbyists, but most Americans don't realize that. So when you look at the factor to whereas it may cost, $3 to make insulin, and they're charging over $400 per vial for someone who doesn't have insurance, that's for a reason. There was mention about older adults in a specific area in regards to the Affordable Care Act. Well, if they're U.S. citizens and they've worked, a legitimate job in the country, then if they're 65 and up, they should be eligible for Medicare in any state, which is a government-funded insurance program. And if not, they may qualify for Medicaid. So because I've been in healthcare for 20 years, when I hear this misinformation, I just have an issue with people putting misinformation. I didn't interrupt you, Dana, so may I finish my point?
But I want to catch this before you.
I didn't interrupt you, so may I
just want to
finish my
interject
point?
something real quick for that Medicare, Medicaid, because the point that I'm trying to make is I'm not talking about being qualified for something. I'm talking about health insurance covering it.
You don't know that Medicare is a health insurance?
No,
This is
you're not understanding what I'm saying. Maybe let me reword it. Both my parents are retired, but the fact is that their Medicaid, Medicare, their Medicare A and B, I'm talking about what is covered. I may have health insurance, but what is covered?
So there's different forms of Medicare, but
We're not making this. Let me give you an example. If I have insurance, whatever that insurance policy is, what is it covering? What if it's Blue Cross Blue Shield, if it's Aetna, insurance companies are not covering certain things. And then with the Obamacare, they rolled back on a lot of things to where they chose not to cover. The insurance company choose what they're going to pay for or not when you go to the doctor or the pharmacy, so if they're not going to pay for a certain prescription, then pharma is going to hike up that price more. So that's when I say that the health insurance regulates the prices for big pharma.
Again,
I'm gonna mute up.
I wanted to finish my statement. So there are different forms of Medicare. You are correct on that. There's also different forms of health insurances that you can have. You can have an HMO policy, which limits to where you can only see providers that are under that specific plan. Or you can have a PPO, or you can have GAP. That's an individual person's decision based on their individual budget or what their employer will pay for. With Medicare, again, Medicare is a government-funded insurance that has been in existence for decades. If there is a U.S. citizen age 65 and up, and in most states, you can activate Medicare 1 month prior to your 65th birthday.
I mean, you're telling us
I didn't interrupt
listen,
you, so why am I being cut off?
Because what are you, I'm trying to understand what you're talking about here.
If I could finish my statement, I would.
I didn't ask the question about Medicare, and I have an understanding on how it works. Or maybe you just want to educate the audience.
Obviously, you don't, based on but I didn't come up here for a debate. I'm just trying to clarify some misinformation that was put out.
I didn't say anything about Medicare, so I'm not misinformed about Medicare or Medicaid. I'm just saying that health insurance don't cover a lot of things because of Obamacare.
And what I was trying to clarify before I was interrupted was that is the case. I was trying to clarify that, but I keep getting interrupted.
You was trying to say that that's not true?
Please continue, Shonda. Please continue.
So I can only speak for Shonda, and I'm not trying to get the audience or the panel to see my view. I'm just trying to bring some objectivity to what I'm hearing, parts that are being left out. If something is not being covered by that particular health insurance, whether it is a private insurance plan or a Medicaid, which is state-funded insurance, or Medicare, it is a reason behind that. Whether you have a private insurance company like a Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, or a Medicare policy, you get a summary of benefits every year. Sometimes that stays the same, sometimes that changes. If there is something that specific individual's policy doesn't cover, then there is a reason behind that. And the main individuals that are making these policies and making these adjustments are the health insurance companies, as well as the elected representatives at the state and the federal level. So if we're going to have a conversation about why X, Y, and Z is not covered, then we don't need to just say, well, you know, this, that, or the other. You need to look at, I believe I get into the source of the problem. Pharmacy is more expensive because who's in bed with the pharmaceutical companies? It's the lobbyists that are donating to all these elected officials when they're running for office and when they get in office to sway them to their side to prevent preventative care, you know, funding from being properly funded versus, you know, medications for this. I didn't hear that come up in the conversation. And it's not about, you know, Shonda being right or wrong. It's about having an objective conversation about the entirety of the issue. And that's not what I heard earlier.
And $35 cap on insulin.
Right. So you didn't hear that part of the conversation from anybody, but you're right. Everything what you just said. My father, who's retired, he has Medicare or A and B or whatever. He's a diabetic, and the past few months, diabetic prescriptions jumped sky high, over 100%, right? But he said, you know what, this makes no sense. But I'm glad I have private insurance from my pension from the company he worked for, but he worked for a state of New Jersey housing, right? That covered it. So if he just had to rely on Medicare, he would have been asked out with his diabetic insurance because they were not covering the cost when the cost jumped so high. But she's right on how she laid it out. And we did not include that.
Wait, Dana,
Where
wouldn't he
I'm
be
coming
in trouble?
from, I'm sorry, real quick.
Wouldn't he be in trouble too if he had to rely on just his pension and they cut Social Security like Republicans want to do?
I don't know, because from what I'm hearing is by the time I'm ready to collect Social Security, we won't have it. So either the Republicans is gonna get rid of it, or the Democrats is going to waste so much money, it's not going to be enough money in to fund it. And
Well,
but see, your guys
Social
sitting up
Security was
here,
only temporary.
when I registered as a Republican, you sitting up here thinking that everything the Republicans do, I'm going to agree with. Absolutely not. Because I explained why I registered as a Republican, and that was for local voting. That has nothing to do with the federal level. But what is going on, when I'm trying to make the distinction is, whatever the Republicans is not doing or what they're trying to get rid of, the Democrats are doing something that's not helping either.
So if it's just about
what is
local
it?
issues, go ahead, Mike, go ahead.
What is it that the Democrats are doing that's not helping?
Well, if they're spending all this money, then what's going to be left for Social Security? I don't really care about Social Security, because my focus right now is to have so much money by the time I'm that age to collect it that I don't have to rely on it, because it's not going to be there. Either the Republicans are going to get rid of it, or the Democrats are going to waste so much money, it's not going to be enough to fund it.
Well, because you need more people putting into the system. That's why you have people who are on green cards and workers on visas coming here, putting into the system tax wise, and so that's where it comes from. You need more people to put in order for it to sustain itself.
My thing is, when it comes to this government, I want the government to just get out of my way. I don't want to rely on the government. I do not. When it comes to, because right now, when COVID hit, I was one of the people that was laid off. It's fine. I got on Medicaid. I paid all those years I worked, I paid into it, but I'm not staying on it because I'm used to private insurance, right? And I'm used to making sure that all the little extra stuff that I want done gets paid, or, is covered to, whereas Medicaid, I mean, look, it's a lot of things that's covered under Medicaid, but if something serious were to happen, they'll push generic on you, and, and not the high quality stuff, because they do leave that for people with private insurance. I just prefer private insurance. I don't want to rely on the government. And I'm not trying to pay thousands of dollars out my pocket because I have no insurance. So I'd rather have something, but it's like, all right, let me shop around for some private insurance. But overall, I don't want to rely on the government because I'll be asked out. I just want the government to get out of my way.
Okay, let's move on to the next segment and topic. Nagone, do you have anything you want to bring up? If you're talking, you're muted, Nagone.
Oh, Dana, quickly, I have a question. There ain't no supplementals for Medicaid? I don't know. I've never had to ask the question. Okay. There was no supplementals.
Medicaid, I don't know. Medicaid is, no, Medicare, I think they have that supplement A, B, C, or whatever, but Medicaid, no.
Yeah, all the way through H. I know they do with Medicare. I'll just ask because I don't know. I don't know. So okay, all right, cool. Thanks.
Because it's like this. Like if you have a baby and you have Medicaid is only in that state insurance. They're only going to pay $5,000. So that doctor and that hospital, they got to eat the rest, because how much it costs to deliver a baby just at a hospital? Let's just say it costs $30,000. The state is only going to pay $5,000. So then I look at it, the reason why I don't trust the government, I look at, okay, if I'm going into this hospital, you know, I want to go into a decent hospital with good doctors, well, what kind of level of care I'm going to get if they know that they're only going to get $5,000 from the state? Now, they should treat everybody equally, but let's just be realistic. Our healthcare in this country is not, does not treat us equally. It's about how much money you have.
Okay. Go ahead, Muti.
No, I have nothing else. I mean, my insurance information, I used to be a producer 20 years ago. So I didn't know one way or the other. That's why I asked the question. I just did not know, period. So she answered my question.
Renaissance,
Hey,
you
Mike.
had, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you because I saw that was a paywall. I'm gonna try to post another one that in a second in the back chat. But just for reference, what I was trying to get at, Trump increased since we're talking about budgets, Trump increased the deficit by the third most of any president in history relative to the economy. The national debt went up roughly $8 trillion under his 4 years in office. I believe that's more than Obama's 8 years. Just putting that out there because people are talking about Democrats spending wildly.
Yeah, I mean, but there's a spending wildly without the actual pot of money, and then they're spending wildly because they were given money to do so. Like they're not taking money from Medicare to actually do all these other things. And we've had, we would have followed, Al Gore's advice about putting a lockbox on it. There wouldn't be any of this actual stuff. We spent all the surplus of that stuff on the Iraq war that people just somehow keep forgetting. But that's where all that money went to. So.
Yeah, just dropped it in the back chat, Mike. Try that one.
Okay.
Haven't heard it going. Is he there? Still there?
Yes.
All right, this is from ProPublica. Donald Trump built a national debt so big, even before the pandemic, that it'll weigh down the economy for years.
That's fake news, huh?
I
hope y'all don't believe everything y'all read.
It's a reference that Renaissance put in there, so I want to make sure that we cover everything that gets put out there, including your content as well.
Honestly, look, I look at it. I made a whole lot of money when Trump was in president, and I lost some money, Joe Biden, and that's my bottom line. Am I making it? Am I losing it?
Okay.
In the state, and I look at it on a federal level, and I look at it on a state level. Who I got to vote for to make sure that I'm making more money? Who I got to vote for to make sure that you're not stopping me to do what I have to do? Period.
Let me just read this real quick, and then we can cover it. One of President Donald Trump's lesser known but profoundly damaging legacies will be the explosive rise in the national debt that occurred on his watch. The financial burden that he's inflicted on our government will wreak havoc for decades, saddling our kids and grandkids with debt. The national debt has risen by almost $7.8 trillion during Trump's time in office. That's nearly twice as much as what Americans owe on student loans, car loans, credit cards, and every other type of debt other than mortgages combined, according to data from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It amounts to about $23,500 in new federal debt for every person in the country. The growth in the annual deficit under Trump ranks as the third biggest increase relative to the size of the economy or of any U.S. presidential administration, according to a calculation to a leading Washington budget maven, Eugene Sturl, co-founder of the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center. And unlike George W. Bush and Abraham Lincoln, who oversaw the larger relative increases in deficits, Trump did not launch two foreign conflicts or to pay for a civil war. Okay, this is a chart that shows the difference between Obama and Trump during their tenures. Economists agreed that we needed massive deficit spending during the COVID-19 crisis to ward off an economic cataclysm, but federal finances under Trump had become dire even before the pandemic. That happened even though the economy was booming and unemployment was at historically low levels. But by the Trump administration's own description, the pre-pandemic national debt level was already a crisis and a grave threat. The combination of Trump's 2017 tax cut and the lack of any serious spending restraint helped both the deficit and the debt soar. So when the once-in-a-lifetime viral disaster slammed our country and we threw more than $3 trillion into COVID-19 related stimulus, there was no longer any margin for error. Our national debt has reached immense levels relative to our economy, nearly as high as it was at the end of World War II. But unlike 75 years ago, the massive financial overhang from Medicare and Social Security will make it dramatically more difficult to dig ourselves out of the debt. So this is interesting. Renaissance, you want to chime in on what you think about this?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to point out, we were talking about spending, and I'm saying when you look at tax policy, this is what Republicans tend to traditionally do when they get in power. They tend to promise a tax cut mainly for wealthy people that they claim will, quote unquote, trickle down to normal people and that will pay for itself and stimulate the economy. That has not worked. We've tried this under each Republican administration, and you see what has happened as a result. The national debt has grown. The tax cuts have not paid for themselves. So when people even like we have now, where people start basically holding the debt ceiling hostage and things like that, and talking about federal spending is out of control, I'm saying you have to look at the budgets Trump's proposed that Republicans went along with under his administration, and look at the debt that he added during his time period, as well as, but like I said, it was outside of him, it was George W. Bush, the next, last Republican president before him, that contributed the second most amount of debt. So that's my whole thing, is that when people try to paint this spending issue as a Democratic thing, when I'm saying when you really look at who's spending and actually who is running, who is actually decreasing the deficits, it's actually Democratic presidents. When you look at what Clinton did, he left office with actually a surplus, and Obama was decreasing deficits as well during his tenure.
Yeah, but what we have to understand is nobody cares about spending when the Republicans are in office. No one cares about it. And nobody is even bringing up the Iraq and Afghanistan war. That's why I don't believe all these fiscal hawks and all this kind of crazy stuff. I just don't believe it, because we're always broke when it comes to giving tax cuts and breaks to middle-class families. But when it comes to giving money to corporations, there's all this money around. Like me, I'm part of the military-industrial complex. I've never heard of anybody not accepting government contracts because of some fiscal issue. Never heard of it. Never will hear of it. So it's only a problem whenever there's people that need stuff. And that's always been the actual marker of this actual discussion point about the deficit and the debt.
Yeah.
I think people look at deficits, and I think they look at, when we're talking about government spending or whatever, at their kitchen table. So,
because they don't understand the issue though, Dana. Like,
they don't, whether you understand it or not, they're not going to understand. They don't want to understand it because they got to get up and they got to go to work every day. They got to make sure that they're paying their mortgage, paying their rent, that their kids.
That's no excuse for not knowing what's going on in your government.
Let me finish what I was going to say as far as this debt, because of the fact is that you're talking about everyday issues are discussed at the dinner table. Eggs are $10. Gas was $5. Okay, now it went down to $3. It's still high. So the fact is that if I looking at it, you're talking about the average American person looking at it, well, I'm spending more money. Inflation is what, at 7%. Mortgage interest is high. So everything is high now. I'm spending more, but my income is not increasing. So when I sit up here and say that I made more money under Trump than I am now, we look at it with the virus or whatever and everything shut down, but I did make more. So if you're saying that he spent all this money when he was in office, well, it didn't reflect my paycheck. It didn't reflect my investments in the stock market. It didn't reflect gas. It didn't reflect my grocery prices. I was still able to afford gas and put food on the table and save money. I can't do that now. And this is how Americans think.
Yeah, I mean,
And you're attributing that to Biden.
No, well, he's the president right now. The same way you contribute things to Trump. You just read this article from ProPublic, and you saying that he increased it, but I didn't feel it in my pocket. I feel it now.
But the whole point is you're not going to feel it immediately. The whole point of long-term deficits, like the article said, they're talking about future generations.
Right, but the problem with that
as far as what we're talking about now, what you're talking about, inflation, that's a global issue. That's not just something that's happening in the U.S.
No, I'm talking about here in America inflation, because I don't care what's going on in Europe. I don't care what's going on in India. Our inflation.
Oh, really? Well, you don't care about inflation?
No, I don't care, because of the fact is that their mortgage, some countries don't even pay a mortgage like I pay here. So the fact
how do you not care about inflation? About
what do you want to do?
How do you not care about inflation in other countries when we get goods from other countries? That doesn't make sense.
What are you going to do to lower inflation?
You have to deal with the supply chain issue, which is why I'm saying that's why you have to care about inflation. Is it just only
the supply chain issue?
That is the main thing that has been driving the inflation.
How about when COVID happened and all that free money they gave away, right? Of course, the President Trump, he was going to sign off on it because that would have been political suicide. But they just, and then even
wait, so then how does stimulus,
even when he was voted out of office, right? And the new administration, they kept spending. Now you sending billions and billions of dollars over somewhere else for other countries, and I'm not going to say it, you know what I'm saying? So the fact that you're sending all this money, and now we're paying a cost to offset that, which is why everything is high. Interest, gas, everything is high.
So how did that cause inflation? How did stimulus cause inflation to other countries? How did a stimulus in the United States cause inflation around the world?
I don't know. I'm not paying attention to other countries. I'm talking about here.
Let's cover Dana's link that she dropped in the chat. This is from usgovernmentspending.com /federal debt. Now, Dana, you brought this up. What would you like to cover on here?
No, I just gave another source. You brought a ProPublic or whatever, because reading that headline, and this is why, just because I read something, whether it's from a Forbes, ProPublic, or anywhere, I don't listen. Doing YouTube, it's all fake. They're one-sided with the headlines. So that headline was disingenuous. It wasn't factual, because you're saying he raised it. Well, did you outline exactly where that money go? Where and how much? Why did it go? Why did the deficit increase under Trump? Lay that out for me. So what I dropped here, it just showed the federal debt in trillions since 2011. And then now under Biden, it is going up even more. And the question that I'm having is, when is it going to stop? And when is it going to drop down? Or are we just going to all blame that on Trump? He's not in office. This person is.
Historically, it tends to drop with Democratic presidents. That's what I was saying with.
So that's the narrative where you're going. Okay, so that's the narrative you're putting out there. Okay.
Put the numbers.
Okay.
But I got a question. With your link, what does your link show differently or add more context to than what we were talking about earlier?
No, that source, that link that I dropped, the difference is it's laying out the full, more of a broader picture, to whereas that specific article was just to say Trump raised the debt ceiling. Okay, so let's just look at it from a broader perspective, and you should always have more than one source. Listen, I'm not trying to convince you to sympathize with Republicans or whatever. You vote for who you vote for. Only thing I'm saying is you need to pay attention to what is happening locally where you live at, because those are the same people that make up Congress. So if I voted for Cory Booker, I look at it not just so much what is he doing on the federal level, how he's voting, because it's not just about the states. When you go to Congress, they're voting for foreign policies or whatever. I look at it, what can that Negro do for the state of New Jersey that's going to benefit New Jersey, number one, that's going to
What can he
benefit
do
Black
out?
people?
What can he do outside of his role in Congress? Like you're saying federal doesn't matter, but then you're saying you want to know what Cory Booker's doing for the state of New Jersey. Like,
because he's the
he's in
senator.
Senate. Yeah, he's a senator.
but
His
Congress-
role is in the federal.
How was
is in the
Congress,
federal Senate.
Congress created? Congress is created from your state representative. So again, I look at it not just what he's doing in Congress, as far as, like I just said, not just foreign policies, because you're not just focusing on domestic, you're voting on policies that's happening internationally. I look at it, what is this Negro? How is he going to benefit New Jersey being in the Senate? See, that's where I start. How is it going to benefit where I live at first?
Well, if
we could look at the infrastructure bill.
I'm not saying for y'all to answer it. It's not something that I wanted. I'm just saying that's how, when I'm voting, that's how I'm looking at it. How is that going to benefit where I live at? And this is what I'm saying, the importance of local elections, of local public policies.
So you're worried about what Democrats are actually going to do for your state, but when Republicans get elected, we're not concerned about anything of what they're actually doing.
A Republican is not in my district. I cannot vote for a Republican Senate because I live in a Democratic district. What is it that you do not understand?
Well, that's true. To your point, that is true. However, when they get to Washington, other Republicans who are elected will influence policy that does impact people in your district too.
No.
Yes. If Republicans decide,
now you're creating a false narrative. Now you're just making stuff up.
It does.
Again, wait, slow down, because you're not in the state of New Jersey, number one. Now, a Republican from the state of New Jersey, that's on a different county, a Republican district. And if you're not, if I don't live in that district, I'm not voting against or for them. So,
but Dana, you're saying that you focus on what Cory Booker can do for the state of New Jersey. If Cory Booker wants to push for, like he wanted to push for qualified immunity being eliminated, if people like Tim Scott say, hey, we're not compromising, we're going to filibuster that bill, how does that not affect what's going to happen in New Jersey at the local level?
Bill, sir.
But it's still going to affect what happens locally in New Jersey.
Let me make it a little bit more plainer. I'm talking about on a state level. Senators, yes, they focus on federal, domestic, and internationally. They also focus on state. They also focus on state. There are things that Cory Booker can allocate for the state of New Jersey, can advocate for the state of New Jersey. That has nothing to do with other states. It has nothing to do with Republicans. It have nothing to do with across the aisle from him. It's not something that has to be passed through Congress. And if I don't think you guys understand the difference between state and federal.
Well, let's get Nagone 11 in. I think he knows a thing or two about state versus federal in New York. Nagone, can you chime in if you're there?
And he's speaking for New York. And that's fine. Well, I'm saying Cory Booker is a representative for the state of New Jersey.
Yeah.
So again, I say, sir, what are you doing for the state of New Jersey? Then you have that conversation. But again, if Cory Booker,
you're asking him what money is he going to allocate?
No. Let me break it down a little bit more to make it more plain. Black people in the state of New Jersey, particularly in Essex County, because that's a big cluster of Black people there, is majority all Democrat. If you're not putting your money, if you don't have an agenda, if you're not organizing, Cory Booker is not going to do anything for you, what he could do, because you're not telling him to. And this is just state.
Well, I would say federal dollars are moved into the your state through your Congress and certainly through your senators. Just like when you guys were doing a lot of that waterfront development, the projects that were going on in Newark, New Jersey. We're doing a lot of rebuilding where Cory was coming through that whole business sector and all that. That was federal dollars coming through from the feds that the Senate really, your senator, he points fingers and helps to put dollars or bring dollars to projects from the federal government through your senators and also
Yes.
through your Congress.
But Nagone, can't
so you do have to
can't that mean another party? Can't that mean, like, if you're talking about federal money, can't that mean another party can affect whether you get that money or not if they say we're not passing a budget or we're cutting all this out of the budget?
That certainly can happen, but every state, every kind of how would you say, every representative, if you have on a federal, they all have their projects, their pet projects and dollars that can come into the state that gets that gets directed to them. A lot of, now you also have to remember, each state gets money from the federal government, to do various federal, state and federal projects that come from the feds. States that certainly are very poor get a lot more federal dollars to come in to help them to not only meet their budgets, but also help them with some of the projects that they have going on. So they are underwritten heavily, and those are basically your red states that are welfare states for the whole practical purposes. But states like New Jersey, New York.
States like New Jersey with very high taxes.
Dana, hey, Dana, be quiet 1 second. Okay. States like be quiet one second. Let me finish what I'm saying. All right, just chill. Okay. States like New Jersey, New York, California, and the others that are quite wealthy, if you would like to say, they have a lot more let's say leverage.
No, we're not wealthy. We just pay more taxes
to move more dollars. You don't pay more taxes. That's ridiculous. How do you generate more tax dollars? You generate more tax dollars from producing a lot more product.
We offset states
from producing a lot more product. Now, let me finish, Dana. So at the end of the day, when you're looking at federal dollars coming in, and moving, the states get those monies, and then your state legislatures and so forth then can vote where a lot of things can move and so forth. It's kind of a trickle down kind of theory in that sense, from the standpoint of how your monies are allocated to various areas in your state once they come from the feds. All right. But your senators and so forth play a key role in bringing federal dollars into your state. Okay. They help to direct that. Okay, along with your Congress, who are also your local federal guys, but your senators, once elected once every 6 years, they're a little more, they're more the statesmen or stateswomen for the states, but yet they do play a very key role in directing federal dollars into in say just like New Jersey, like those projects that are being done on the waterfront there, and those projects that are being done in Newark and so forth. All of that, all that plays a key role. Your senator plays that, and he can work with those initiatives. He can work with various groups and say, we're going to develop this for education. We're going to develop this for healthcare. We're going to develop this for transportation, or for business. Many of these various projects that come through, the states do play a key role from your state legislatures in how a lot of those monies will be directed. And that's why when a lot of federal dollars come in that are earmarked maybe for your area, do not get in there, because the states get a hold of it, and then they start to play around and redirect monies and so forth to those areas that are more politically galvanized. So you have to understand how that works. But anyway, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say that's what's happening in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Because Mississippi received a lot of monies that should have been directed to Jackson, and Jackson did not get it, and so they're suffering.
That's right. That's right.
A Republican-controlled state, made sure that they siphoned off money away from Democratic areas, the most strongest area, which is Jackson, the capital, where 83 or over 80% of the constituency are African American or Black.
Yeah. And that's the key. That's why politically you have to be organized. But these states that are where dollars are coming in, like Mississippi, where you now have state legislatures and so forth that are Republican and so forth, they redirect those monies from definitely coming into your community and they take those dollars and they keep your community in many respects because it's politically unbalanced with respect to the aspect of power. Now your community is deprived. And that's where the local game, where your state legislatures are very important in this process, where you have to control a lot of that if you certainly want to have certain things done in your community. The Republicans, on the whole, do not care about the overall Black community. They don't give a damn about you. This has been seen. We've seen this across the board. You're poorer. You're getting more federal dollars from the federal government. Okay, you're basically welfare states, and those monies, when they do come in, are being directed to certain areas of the white community more so than against yours. This is proven. We've seen this. They don't care about you. They don't care about your community.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to quickly say, no, an example of that too is the refusal of red states to accept Medicare and Medicaid expansion. Free money from the federal government.
Correct. That's exactly correct. And Obamacare and all that, many of these states have rejected that. These red states have rejected that. And consequently, and concomitantly, you have some of the worst healthcare, I would call deserts, if you will, in the country, where you have people dying from basic diseases that are being untreated because they don't have any types of coverage. But people are saying, yeah, we don't want this with Obamacare. We don't want this. We don't want that. We don't want that. And what are you doing? The red states, poorest people have the worst healthcare coverage. They're dying and they're even closing hospitals. States like South Carolina, Mississippi, Kentucky, and so forth. It's going on across the Confederacy. That's what you see. All right. Let's call it out.
If they're voting against Obamacare, what's the issue? Then they don't want it.
No. It's not a question about they don't want it. They want it, but the powers that be in that state have directed that for it not to come into the state. Okay. And that's not you. And Dana, that's not you voting on that. Okay. That's not you. It's others who are seeing to it that that's coming to their states. Now that comes through your legislature. That comes through your state legislatures. And that's why you're seeing the problems that you have. Dana, just be quiet 1 second. You've been chattering like a magpie for the last time. It's making no sense. I'm just telling you exactly how this thing is working. You got to understand the process.
About what you just said. You just spewed out a whole bunch of stuff.
We spewed out a whole bunch of stuff. This is what's going on. This is what's going on. And these men have sat here and showed you.
If that is an issue, why are not the people in that state complaining? Why do you keep voting the same people and vote them out? Where's your agenda to organize together? You come together, you organize, and you
Mississippi
demand.
Is not getting rid of the Republican Party leadership.
So I'm sorry, he's specifically talking about southern states.
Of course, I'm talking very much about southern states.
Who's in South
Of course, I'm
Carolina?
talking about southern states and some others that would be considered a Midwestern and others. Yes, of course, I'm talking about that. Yes.
If South Carolina healthcare is so bad, then why do those people keep voting those same politicians in? Why is Tim Scott still in the Senate? Why are you still voting the same local people?
Well, you have to understand. We have. That's exactly voter suppression. You have. Hold on, Dana. There's an answer to that because we start getting into the process. That's when you start getting into gerrymandered seats. Okay, you start looking at areas that are voter suppressed. These are the key areas. That's why you have these big fights in the state courts and so forth about districts and so forth that are being illegally drawn to actually have candidates who are coming in picking their voters as opposed to voters. It's the voters picking picking their candidates.
Specifically about South Carolina, what is the population?
Well, specifically about South Carolina. Do you want to?
I'm asking you a question. What is the population of white people versus Black people in South Carolina? And the majority of people registered in South Carolina are Republicans. If that is the case, and you have shitty healthcare because of the Republicans, then those white Republicans are voting for shitty healthcare. So you're talking about gerrymandering, you're talking about voter suppression. Well, Black people in the state of North Carolina is a smaller population. So whether it was no gerrymander, none of that, that's not the point. You're voting for the Republicans, like you said, that are getting rid of decent healthcare. And these are white people voting for these Republicans.
Well, you have many white people who are voting against their own interests because you're black.
Okay, then. So
And
then
and
why
and
are you
and
bringing
and
up voter
and and
suppression?
and unfortunately, we have to sit down
Listen,
and we
I
have to
don't do
talk
that.
about we
Saying
have to talk about that as
race
well.
stuff because you're black. Many white people are voting. Okay, so white people are voting against their interests because they don't like black people. What would that mean?
Yeah, yes,
No,
very much
sir.
so.
No, no, no,
Very
sir.
much so, and it's
You
been
can
proven.
believe that if you want.
It's
I
not
don't
a
do
question
that
about you
race
believe it.
thing. I don't do
It's
that. I
not a
don't do
question.
that race
Dana,
pandering
hey,
thing.
Dana, it's not a question about we
No,
don't believe. It's a
it is
question. It's a
that
question
you're
of looking at their
delusional,
voting
sir.
patterns.
You're delusional.
It's a question about
No,
looking at their
no.
voting patterns and
Okay,
who
well,
they're
I have a
voting for, who
question.
they're voting against.
Go.
Well, you could
Go.
also
I
look at
have
you
a
can
question.
It's
you can
not
also
race.
right,
Sorry.
so-
Let me so let me make this quick point. It's not race pandering. It's a known fact. Look at the Southern strategy. Republicans themselves have admitted to that. I forgot who.
Yes.
I think it
sorry,
was
the
Bush.
Southern
I think it was
strategy of
Bush's
what?
campaign
Of
manager.
what
He
year
said
was
yes.
this?
We use the Southern strategy
What's the
to
Southern
make
strategy?
white folks in the South to
You don't
vote against their
understand
own
the Southern
presidential.
strategy?
So
That's
no,
what they
you tell me.
said.
I'm
That's
from
what
New
they.
York. What's the
It's not
Southern
me.
strategy, and what year did this take place?
Southern, you don't know the Southern
What
strategy?
decade? What decade? What
You-
decade?
What decade?
I just
Look,
asked you a
hold on.
That
question.
gave Ronald Reagan. That gave Bush.
Hold on a second.
Bush
Hold on a
Jr.
second.
That's what the Southern strategy given.
Hold. The
I
Southern
asked you to
strategy.
explain to me Southern strategy and what decade did this start to exist?
So you don't know the history, do you?
Since Nixon.
I'm asking you a question.
So
Sir.
no.
Enlighten me,
Hold
enlighten me, sir. Enlighten me.
Hold on a
What
second.
is
I'm gonna get
strategy
rhetorical
and
with
what
you. Do you know
decade
who
did it
Do you know
start?
who Lee Atwater is? Danny, you over there
I'm
popping up.
asking you a
Who
question.
is Lee Atwater?
Just
Who's
explain
Lee
it,
Atwater?
Nagone, just
He's on
explain
the
it, please.
Southern strategy.
No. I'm not gonna explain it. I've listened. I've
I'm
Let's go.
listened
You
to
gotta
this.
explain because some people don't
I've
know.
listened to this. I've listened to this moron for
One
too
second,
long.
No,
And
no.
I don't
Mike,
want to waste
go.
time with this, man.
Nagone.
That's why. Maybe I'm not good to be on
Okay,
these
well, I'll
panels.
explain it.
I can't
I'll
deal with these
explain
people,
it.
man.
All right.
Let me do a
I'll explain
timeout.
it.
I need to ask
I'll
Mike something. Can you
explain
do a timeout? Mike, this has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the conversation. Can
Yes,
you
sir.
put the link to this Zoom because somebody wants to join? And is that
There's a
okay?
link in the chat. There's a link in the chat.
No, I need to.
Yeah.
I guess I can
Zone
text it
is-
to him.
Zone
Is
is
that-
actually
Spamming the link.
yeah, Zone is actually spamming the link in the chat. It hasn't went
It's
away.
what?
Zone
Z-
and
the
actual
moderator.
spamming the link.
Oh, Zone.
Link in the
Okay,
chat.
okay.
Yeah.
That's what's in the chat.
Yeah. MOT, please explain the Southern strategy.
Okay, the Southern strategy is once the parties have a flip, is how they appeal to Southern whites to have them vote Republican based on race, racial issues.
Mhm.
And there's no way Dana does not know what the Southern strategy is. I don't buy that. Just don't
I'm
buy it.
sorry, I wasn't paying attention. What did you say?
The Southern strategy was an actual deliberate model of appealing to Southern whites through racialized coded issues, pretty much.
Okay, what I asked you, what decade was this created?
After the party switch, 64.
Oh, you mean in 1875? With what
No.
party switch?
After the Civil Rights Bill, 1964.
19 what? 64.
64.
The
Yeah.
Southern strategy. Okay,
Yes.
so the Southern strategy, and you mean to tell me Black people specifically in the state of South Carolina didn't make any type of progress to make sure
So
that
we're just blaming
not
Black
be at the
people
bottom of
for
the
this,
totem
or-
pole? 'Cause this is where I'm going with it. This is where I'm going. Because that was
okay.
in 1964. We're in 2023. So you mean to tell me that you want to sit up here and say something from 1964 is still holding you back because you're Black?
The
Get the hell
strategy
out of here.
started
wait,
in
hold on,
1964.
Hold on.
It
Dana.
started in 1964. It was
Oh,
used by Nixon,
Dana,
by
Dana,
Bush,
Dana.
by
How
Bush
many
One
people
Jr.
second,
on this
time out.
Donald
panel
Trump.
live?
I need a
Dana,
time out.
Dana,
I need a
Dana.
time out.
Hold
How
on.
many people in the panel
the
live in South
passcode?
Carolina on the panel?
1 second, time out. What's the passcode?
There is no passcode.
He said he needs a passcode. This is what I'm telling you. Can you drop it in the chat? The link in this chat?
It's
Nobody
okay.
needs a passcode to come up here.
You can still ask for a passcode.
Yes.
Here's the
Okay.
link, Dana.
Yeah, but nobody up here lives in South Carolina. Nobody up here lives.
Sorry,
Well, I own property in
Nagandi,
Mississippi.
I'm probably saying your name wrong, but he brought up South Carolina.
Well, South Carolina is an example where, so on the screen, on the screen right here, it shows a list of states that did not support
Except
the
Medicaid
Affordable Care Act. Okay, and here we have it. Under the Affordable Care Act, states have the option to expand Medicaid eligibility to non-elderly people with incomes up to 138% of the federal poverty level. As of the time of writing, only 12 states have not done so: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. 11 of the 13 states with the highest uninsurance rates nationwide have not expanded Medicaid. Medicaid expansion remains an important issue for both state and federal policy. Or maybe I didn't share the screen. Shit. Wait, did anybody miss that or?
No, I mean, we heard what you said, but the screen went
Okay.
away. And all I seen was just your avatar. I haven't seen the actual screen from what you.
Oh, sorry. Let me share the screen. I should not have done that. I'm not sure what happened. Yep, this was provided by Shonda in the chat from urban.org. So 3.7 million people would gain health coverage in 2023 if the remaining 12 states were to expand Medicaid eligibility. Can anybody in the chat see it? Push one if you can see it.
They should be. They're seeing now. I can continue. Mike, is it gone?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just waiting for
No,
confirmation.
they can see it. If I'm looking from both ends of my monitors, I can see it.
Okay. Yep, just let me reinstate what I was saying. Under the Affordable Care Act, states have the option to expand Medicaid eligibility to non-elderly people with incomes up to 138% of the federal poverty level. As of the time of writing, only 12 states have not done so: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. 11 of the 13 states with the highest uninsurance rates nationwide have not expanded Medicaid. Medicaid expansion remains an important issue for both state and federal policy. Dana, you want to weigh in on this?
No, I heard you, but I'm trying to make sure that he gets the link. So we're going back talking about healthcare now?
No, I think that you was asking about South Carolina and healthcare, right? Healthcare coverage with the Affordable Care
I was
Act.
more so the question I was saying as far as the voting, who's voting, the majority of the population are what? White Republicans. So if if you're saying Republicans are voting to get rid of this, get rid of that, well, their own people are voting for it.
Yeah, but it's the legislature who actually decides whether or not they're going to do Medicaid expansion. And even though, like, okay, Ohio and Indiana, deeply red, deeply Republican, and Kentucky, they still got the Medicaid expansion, while you have other states on there who have Republican legislatures that didn't. That's the only point that we're making. That's the only point.
Yeah, we find that if the 12 non-expansion states were to fully implement a Medicaid expansion in 2023, 3.7 million fewer people would be uninsured, a reduction of 29.1%. Groups with the largest gains in coverage due to Medicaid expansion would include non-Hispanic Black people, young adults, and women, particularly women of reproductive age. New state spending in the current non-expansion states would be fully or largely offset by savings in other areas and potential new revenue. Several comprehensive analysis of the states that have expanded Medicaid have found that expansion had a net positive impact on many state budgets.
I don't know.
It's
Let's
singled
spin it on
out.
me.
It said something. What did it say about the Hispanics and Black people? It said they were
It said
what?
including non-Hispanic Black people, non-Hispanic Black people, right? Young
Uh-huh.
adults and women, particularly women of reproductive age. New state spending in the current non-expansion states would be fully or largely offset by savings in other areas and potential new revenue. Several comprehensive analysis of the states that have expanded Medicaid have found that expansion had a net positive impact on many state budgets.
Expanding Medicaid. Okay, so what? So in conclusion, what?
In conclusion, it would be better if they accepted the ACA. These states have not accepted. Yeah.
Okay,
These,
okay, so going back to the Obamacare thing. Okay, so again, and what state is it? South Carolina.
South Carolina is one of the states, but there are 12 states that have not done so.
Republican states.
Yeah, they're all Republican-controlled states.
Majority of those are the majority of the population are white Republicans.
I would say yes, but I think that's true in every state in all these states that are mentioned, right? Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, South Dakota.
There's no sizable Black
Let's just say
Republican.
70% of the population. Let's just say 70% of the population are white, and 60 of that percent are Republican. So the thing is, why is it when they vote that way, they vote these politicians in who don't accept affordable Obamacare? I'm pretty sure some of the Republicans disagree with them, but just for the sake of this conversation, they vote on these Republicans in these states to not accept Obamacare. But my question would be is why is it that the negative result of not having Obamacare is only affecting Black people? Why are we always on the list of being most likely affected by this? Is it because socioeconomic issue where, generational wealth or whatever? So why are we collectively at the bottom? And then I would say, okay, so what is it that we need to do when it comes to economically to get ourselves up from poverty? Because I'm pretty sure there are poor white Republicans that are still voting for these politicians, but apparently it's affecting Black people more.
Well, one of the first things that we can do, because we can provide affordable care to Black people so that they're not.
But they don't have the votes. They don't have the numbers.
But that's the fault of Republicans, not the fault of Black people.
No. But they don't have. It's not enough Black people to vote against the counter. Because that's why I asked the question, the majority of the population of that, let's say Alabama or even South Carolina, majority of the population are what? White. Now, is that majority Republican? And if the answer is yes, then they're all going to vote Republican. Okay, so on the Republican agenda is to not accept Obamacare. So who's going to be affected? The white people that voted for these Republicans or the Black people? And then my question is, which is always my question, whether you accept Obamacare or not, why are we Black people always at the bottom?
Because
I think
go
that's
ahead.
a red herring question that you can't answer. The fact is that both people are affected.
And it could be answered, but it's kind of now we're going into a different topic, but that is a topic that should be
topic. I'm actually answering your question. Your question is, why are we at the bottom? It doesn't matter whether that is. I'm not, you're not, no one on the panel isn't. But at the end of the day, some people are, and including whites. But that doesn't take away from the fact that in these actual Republican states, when they vote against their own best interests, they're all fucked. That's the only thing I can tell you.
So why are they voting against their own interests?
I don't know.
Because they don't want Black people sharing in the economy itself.
They're voting against their own interests because they don't want Black people to get health care.
Yes.
So,
there are multiple.
So basically, we're talking about Obamacare here, we're accepting Obamacare. So these white people, these white Republicans that live in, let's say, Alabama or South Carolina, I'm not going to vote for Obamacare. I'm going to sacrifice myself of having access to affordable health care because I don't want Black people to have it.
They did a poll. They did a poll. And they asked specifically, would you accept Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act? And many of them said the Affordable Care Act. And so what they did, I think it was in Kentucky, they just rebranded it and kind of just accepted it, right? And so these are the sort of issues that that are ballot based.
Connect. That's what they call
Yeah.
it, Kentucky Connect.
Yeah, and so that's how they vote at the polls. That's how they vote at the polls. Go ahead,
Yep.
Renaissance, please. Renaissance man, please continue.
Yeah. I'm gonna drop another link to in the back chat of Dying Whiteness by Jonathan Wetzel. He lays this out perfectly. Let me drop in the back chat and have you play it, please.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the quick point that I would like to make is that the reason why a lot of these, white Southerners and white Midwesterners that vote against their own interests is because
just dropped it.
It is because of propaganda. It's because of propaganda they see on Fox News that tell them like, well, we can't have socialized medicine because it's going to give urban people so what's the talking point they always say like I forget basically social spending. Basically, the thing that it comes down to is like, oh, they don't earn this money because they're taking money from white folks from our tax money to give to them as handouts. So that's the talking point. That's why you always hear Republicans say these coded words like handouts to those who don't deserve it. It's coded language. So that's why they vote
but
against.
That's been the history of the country, and that's something that we just can't all of a sudden just now try to go over. I mean, this has been the history of the country. I mean, those areas, those former slaveholding states, they vote against their own best interests every time. I mean, they had a chance for Doug Jones, but they voted for a football coach who could barely speak English. Like, you literally cannot help people like that. And the only thing you can do is move out of there if you have the means to move out of there. Everybody don't have the means to just up and leave. I mean, it sounds great, but it doesn't. It isn't feasible.
And most Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. So just the idea that people can just get up and leave, half of America can't even afford $500 hitting them unexpectedly.
Exactly. And the thing is, too, this goes back to the Civil War. I mean, you had poor Southerners that fought for the Confederacy. They were fighting for plantation owners who owned slaves, but these poor Southerners didn't even, they never owned slaves, but it was just that propaganda, that pride for fighting for the South. So it goes back even back then. So, yeah.
We have a guest on that we should welcome.
That's Judge Joe Brown.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you,
guys. Look, I think this is a good conversation, and everybody is, I think it's a good discussion, and everybody is saying a lot of good stuff. So I want him to come and give his to join into the conversation.
Wherever you feel like jumping in, Judge Brown.
Oh yeah, I'm listening.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
there's a lot of this right now going around. It's quite popular. It always has been with humanity. They have preconceived notions that match up with beliefs rather than rational and logical opinions that are reached with critical analysis of the circumstances, the facts, and the data. So it's not unusual. A lot of times we have people supporting things that are not in their best interest. When you start talking about healthcare, it's interesting, and you're right in terms of your observations about southern regions, but one thing too, Obamacare, that would be the source, Affordable Health Care Act, has absolutely nothing to do with President Obama. It was drafted by Tennessee's senior Republican U.S. Senator, Dr. Bill Frist of Nashville, whose family founded Blue Cross, Blue Shield, etc., and most of the HMOs. He introduced it for the first time in 2003. He could not get it passed, and he kept going at it for a while until it developed that Obama's Indonesian trust fund acquired significant interest in Blue Cross, that the Obama administration jumped in and pushed it, and it was passed in 2010. But it certainly has nothing to do with him in the drafting. And it's got to do with the Southern white guy who I met, who's a very interesting person. He's quite selfish. He was U.S. Senator. He was Senate Republican leader, well, majority leader for the U.S. Senate for the Republican Party. And interestingly enough, he bragged that he had never voted for anybody but himself for any office. And he first voted the first time he decided to run for U.S. Senator. It's an interesting proposition. Read the thing sometimes. We do need comprehensive health care, but in my life, this is the worst I've ever seen it. And it has gone completely downhill. And if you read the fine print in affordable care, you will discover that Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and some of their affiliates are making a literal killing off of the people. And a lot of what the government is paying them as a corporate entity could be more readily and feasibly spent on the public directly in terms of subsidizing the medical cost rather than reimbursing the medical insurance industry almost completely for every dime they put out, plus extraordinary benefits for generic drugs that they have control of. And we have a lot of blame put on the pharmaceutical industry that really lies more properly on the medical insurance industry. I'm not talking about all medical insurance coverage, because a lot of general insurance companies provide pretty good rates and benefits. But the medical insurance company, and it started off with Blue Cross decades ago, advertised falsely about, since they specialized in medical insurance, that they were the best to cover you. They're not. And most of the time they rip you off. So if you want to see what it's about, get seriously ill and compare your copay on a 30-day prescription for medication compared to your copay on, say, a 90-day prescription.
Wait, Judge, I have a quick question. So
yes.
Do you, if that was not passed, I am personally someone who supported Sanders and single payer, but do you not agree that despite the system being broken, we haven't seen an alternative from Republicans, or do you believe that Republicans have a better alternative? And then B,
well, I don't say they have a better alternative. I say the Republican Senate Majority Leader, Dr. Bill Frist of Nashville, drafted and introduced the legislation.
I agree. It has lots of lobbyists with it.
Republican bill, and it's passed by a Democratic executive administration, or not passed, but lobbied for effectively. So we're not getting well served by what they have. For example, I have one prescription that if I get a 30-day supply, my copay is $432. If I get a 90-day supply, my whole copay for 90 days worth is $19.87. So why is that? That's because if you read it, there's some built-in port for the medical insurance.
And insurance. I agree. I'm not saying
it's not the pharmaceuticals, it's the insurance companies. Like the other thing too, they try to encourage you to use generics. But the deal is, if you read the fine print on the generics, this Republican/Democrat bill, both of them responsible for it, actually subsidizes the generic pharmaceutical industry that is spared the need for the 5-year field trial thing for the liability insurance coverage and the research, and they get basically a 100% reimbursement for everything they put out for a generic because they own it. So they get your premium and your copay and extra for the government that is inexcusably profitable, and that should go directly to the people. Something needs to be done about medical insurance coverage. and the medical provisions in this country, since pride of place certainly doesn't go to us. And I think we're number 28 on the list in terms of benefits to citizens. So it definitely needs to be revised.
No, I agree. But I do point out it's still better than nothing, because I look at the number of people, I believe it was 2.6 million African Americans who didn't have coverage, who now have coverage, and that life expectancy has gone up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect. Like I said, I acknowledge all the things you said. It's better than nothing.
2.7 million, and I divide that by 360 million, and what figure do you get and how many decimal places? Now, the thing
it's a small amount, but people dying is a good.
Yeah, I know. But see, one thing that I have found in 50 years of doing what I do is you don't make it in this country, you don't make it anywhere in the world without personal effort. And what I dealt with for 50 years was the after effect of a lot of people, black, white, brown, red, yellow, more so in certain groups than others, who had not put in the work to prepare themselves for life. And that starts from kindergarten through 12th grade. And they didn't get prepared at home. The schools don't prepare them now. The academics are shot to hell compared to what I experienced. And it's not a good picture. So somewhere in there, somebody's going to have to say it's time to get back to work, not necessarily on a 9-to-5 job, but to get to work doing what you need to do to get the stuff that you demand delivered to you, because we don't. We have a singular habit of being so loyal to a party that whether or not they ever give us anything, they get our vote, and the other party never gets our vote, no matter what they might otherwise be induced to try to deliver in return for that vote. So neither party has an incentive to do a damn thing for us except either get disgruntled or laugh about it. It's really stupid in terms of a failure to effectively exercise the voting franchise.
Well, wouldn't you say it's more effective to organize within the party? Like if you look at the Tea Party, like them or not, they have affected change within the Republican Party.
Oh, sure, I agree.
But they didn't suggest going to vote for Democrats. They got more organized within their party.
Well, the Tea Party has left a lot of problems in the law over the years because of their singular ignorance of what's going on. Like, for example, there is one Democratic state representative in Tennessee that they decided to thwart by putting him in what is nominally one of the worst locations in the Capitol building. But he just happens to be next to where the junior representatives were ordinarily assigned, and most of them were in the Tea Party. So here they are, Tea Party types trying to figure out what's going on and how things work, regularly consulting with rather liberal black Democrat on how to do it. It just gets really crazy. And they have this book that is pattern law, and they sort of tear it out, change the names around, and they passed this stuff for legislation, and it has generated a lot of inconsistencies in the law, civil and criminal, economic and otherwise. And it's a real live mess that just gets worse because you have a denegation of education. Anybody can do it. That's not the case. So it's not good all the way around. Now, we're going to have to start making some hard decisions. And yes, racism exists. It's really bad in certain quarters, but it's adversity. And humans have risen from cave to condo by dealing with adversity. So adversity just means that it's something for you to focus on and defeat. Now, that's what we have to do.
Last question, then I'll pass the mic. if you do invoke a strategy of, I guess, voting for a different party, if you're talking about the Black vote in general, my understanding, at least for federal politics, is a lot of this is governed by seniority, and that you run the risk of basically losing seniority in some of your more senior people who can do things like assign committees or be on committees, people who raise money, that's where you lose political capital. And that's why you rarely see people switch parties like that between election cycles. Of course,
that's true. But the fundamental question still goes back to what good does it do the way we're doing now? We have plenty of members constituting, well, we have plenty of representatives in the House and in the Senate who are in the Black caucus, but they're singularly ineffective, in fact, useless, because they're surrogates for something else, and they rely upon their skin is kin situation to get elected to represent somebody else besides their obvious constituents. So the Black caucus is useless. We do have senior Black members on committees, but they aren't too good about it. And I know that for a fact because some years ago, I did a side consultancy where I would consult with and advise some of the senior Black Democrats who ran committees, and it was astonishing the dereliction of their positions. They would not have any idea. And I'd say, look, didn't you read this? Well, we've got a real bright guy. I said, you mean that little 23-year-old that just got out of school and didn't do too well that you hired? Yeah, well, he's 24 now. So there's a 24-year-old making policy who's unelected for the United States of America, and you're more concerned about other things that you think are greater political expedience, which just are frou-frou nonsense on the social side that leave you singularly incapable of exercising the authority that goes with your seniority on this committee you've been on for 19 years. What time is that?
Well,
explain that to me.
No, I hear you. I would say, though, that, all of DC is, a lot of people don't know this. I live right outside of DC, that it's run by 22, 20. These are people who work in these congressmen's offices, these 22, 24 years olds, because honestly, you can't pay someone in their 40s or more senior enough money to really stay there. They really, are really, like I said, get paid pennies, $30,000 a year in DC. You do the math. And that's how things get done. I agree.
That's not quite where I'm going with this. I was an intern at a DC think tank 50-some years ago. I did a lot of work inside of Congress and stuff, and it always impressed me the erudite nature of a lot of representatives, congressmen and senators, and how much expertise they had accumulated in various factors and stuff. And then 40 some years later, when I started consulting, I didn't see it. I saw, instead of a senior member of the House being an expert, absolute expert, well-versed, well-read, well-researched on a subject, I saw ignoramuses that were relying on 20-something-year-olds instead of on what should have been their own expertise. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I got
it's a deterioration.
I got a question. So when can we expect for the Republicans to be actually, I'm talking about Black Republicans, both men and women. When can we really expect for them to get really serious about talking about actual policy-based initiatives that actually help Black people, rather than just trying to stopgap things that are actually happening on their side? Like, when can we really expect for people to get real serious?
Okay, here's the thing. I would suggest we not get so worked up over the labels and get more concerned with the substance. So what is it that Black people need, rather than what they get sold as a recipe item? What you need is policy that will benefit our people. But interestingly enough, it's been my experience that the policies that most benefit us are not necessarily those that designate us.
Correct. I mean, because whatever is going to be done is going to have to be done for most of the people in the country, and we're just included in it, just like what you said. But when it comes to substance and policies, most of their conservatives, even on TV, with these groups, they only seem to protect white interests. They don't even care about black interests at all.
Well,
Period.
let me get into that. One of the main problems that impacts our people is the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
But the criminal justice system has very little to do with the prevention of crime. What it is concerned with these days is the control of labor.
Yeah.
This country is the only one of the industrialized countries in the world that has no coherent government program to rationalize and correct the obsolescence of ordinary workers to the workforce in the face of industrial technology and computerization. We just leave it to private enterprise, but private enterprise is not in the business of charity. So what happens is somebody's been working at a factory or a warehouse for 19 years, driving a forklift, and he gets a pink slip saying, "Bye, sucker, you're being laid off because we have somebody that wants to be a billionaire before he's 50 running the company now. So ciao, you're on your own. Forget your mortgage, forget your savings, forget your health care, forget the funds you put aside to send your kids to college so they can do better than you did." Now, what we do is easy enough to perceive if you consider labor as a commodity like wheat, corn, or cotton. When you get a glut, you do three things. You cut back production of the commodity, you subsidize the would-be producer, and you store the surplus. Well, in this instance, since it's labor, the surplus is stored in a warehouse. That warehouse is called a prison, or, that's the stand-in for the grain silo. The subsidy is the government assistance check, and the cutting back of production is what is done with no family training, no man up thing, no focus on duty, honor, obligation, et cetera, and a fixation on hip hop and other things that lead to the youth banging out, drugging out, dropping out, getting knocked up too early, too often, develop inappropriate attitudes, worldviews, lifestyles, ways of carrying oneself, lack of vocational and academic preparation, behavioral concepts that lead to inappropriate behavior that cause chaos where they live, so their communities cannot engage in effective self-help through the political process. And eventually, they not only are unemployable by their lack of personal preparation or socialization and acculturation, they get that felony, which means they're going to be very difficult to employ. And when they go to the penitentiary, they're not used as free labor, though there is free labor involved. And that basically is a spinoff on this whole parable, idle minds mischief make. So you want to give them something to do to keep them out of trouble, so they may stamp license plates, but you don't want their labor. You're trying to prevent them from being laborers. So you take them out of the labor market. Why is that so imperative? Because there are other people, and when they get cut out, they've got a different worldview. They get mad and they buy 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer at a lawn and garden shop. They read up on how to work with it, and it becomes an excellent long pulse explosive, and they blow up courthouses in places like Oklahoma City and kill 100+ people at one time. And let's say the last individual that would typify that would be Timothy McVeigh. So you don't want Timothy McVeigh types. You would prefer the type that you warehouse to be somebody that in the process causes chaos where he lives. You don't have to worry about him doing anything against the government, just his own people. and you safely take them out of the loop. So criminality is actually good for business in the country, and not the business of making money off of them, but the business of getting them out of making money. Though there is a very high growth industry on feeding, clothing, sheltering, transporting, supervising, and providing communications for them. I ran the grand jury in Shelby County as the supervising judge in 1995. I had them look at the books and accounts of all state, county, and city enterprises. And I discovered such things on their report as, let's say, the phone system that so many inmates use to make a collect call. Well, the taxpayers paid for the installation. For the first 4 months of the year, it was $1.20 to make the call and 80 cents a minute thereafter. And then for the remaining 8 months, it went up to $1.25 a minute. And his profit for that year, the entity, the net profit was $92 million. And in the next year, when it was $1.25 to make the call and to pay for it, collect thereafter, the net profit was 112 million. That was net, of which he was supposed to pay the county 4%, but worked out being zero because these smart accountants did that. He only operated out of a post office box because he essentially collected the paychecks or the checks that South Central Bell, now AT&T, sent him because they collected from their customers. So it was a giveaway, and some money went under the table to county commissioners and city councilmen and other people of concern. So it was a criminal enterprise.
I have a question, because we was talking about the George Floyd bill that wasn't passed or whatever, which I guess supposed to be about reconstructing the criminal justice system. But what you just laid out was a prime example of they're not going to change the criminal justice system unless it's for profit, because it's all about profit. It's all about putting bodies in and out.
No, it doesn't have to be about profit. It can be about electing the right judges if you have. So the next one who gets in, who is concerned and oversees a grand jury, can instruct them to take action like I did. It's up to making sure that you serve on juries and not getting excused. It's up to you ensuring that if you have an elected mayor and the mayor can do something about seeing who the chief of police is, he does so in your favor. You can elect the sheriff, and most sheriffs, in fact, all of them just about in the country are elected. So you have input on that. You can make your voting influence felt when it comes to the district attorney. If you vote, you can make sure that you vote for an effective judge. Like for years, we had one crazy bastard who was.
I don't vote for judges in New Jersey.
You don't, but most states you do. Most states you do. So we had one locally as an example. He had been formerly Grand Dragon of the Klan and chairman of the White Citizens Council, yet he got the black bloc vote every single election because he paid the black officials well to have himself inserted on their sample handout ballots that paid poll workers passed out to black voters going to the polls.
We're talking about Democratic black officials that were paid off,
yeah,
right?
well, that's the way it works. So I was a lifetime Democrat, but I'm not now. I'm an independent. I wouldn't vote for them because I think they are an abomination in what they're trying to support. What is it? Destruction of the traditional family, which has become the root of most of the evil that we have. You take the man principle out, you get deep off into fostered emotionalism, and you lose the logical thing. I'm not saying women can't prosper by that too, but they are no longer discouraged. They are no longer encouraged to be critical and analytical, reasonable, logical, and rational and skeptical. Everybody is encouraged to be emotive, and you go on feelings and belief rather than on opinion that's subject to modification on acquisition of better analysis or data. It's a bad thing. So
Also,
we've
Judge,
got a problem.
Before you get too far, I was going to say quickly on your point on crime as well, too, being conscientious about your politicians. I once, when I was doing an internship with the state, took a tour of two state prisons, and two guards told me, hey, the people who cause the most increase in the prison system is the politicians with their tough on crime rhetoric instead of a smart on crime rhetoric.
Yeah.
As Judge, this is Chief Cook.
Hi, Chief. What's going on?
Hey,
You're
you
from
absolutely
Memphis. Hey, Chief, what's happening?
Hey, and speaking as an officer, our job is to enforce the law, but we can't change the law. We can't do anything about it, but just enforce it. But yeah, we get stupid laws as well, and some of the laws just don't make no damn sense. And,
they don't.
Unfortunately, we got arrested like the old seatbelt law we used to have. We just got it back in the day. We arrest people wearing seatbelt. It's just constantly. That's what they got, and things happen. But I know
I'm running for county librarian, so I promise to be tough on crime.
Yeah, and questions and stuff like that, and of course now what happens to us now, thanks to the unit I used to run, and unfortunately they expanded because these bad apples happen because we lost
about Blue Crush.
Yeah, Blue Crush and also the Scorpion Squad.
Okay, you know what's really behind the Blue Crush?
Yeah, I know. Go ahead.
I mean, in this Scorpion Squad, what's really going on? It wasn't police misconduct per se, where there's a random cop. The latest thing is the victim was poking one cop's wife and had been poking one cop's baby mama and was trying to hit on a third cop's woman.
Yes.
So that
getting off of topic with the Scorpion unit thing, but
because is that Dinah?
Yeah, they were talking about, I don't know who gave him the link to come on, but the overall, we was talking about the healthcare, criminal justice, but overall, I just think that I don't think that particularly Black people should not just rely on a party. I think it's not just about voting and going to the polls. It's so much involved when we're talking about participating in the science of politics that Black people do not do. And it's not about, because white people don't like Black people or Trump being a racist, but I look at it, what are you doing to make a difference, particularly in your local district area? And we're not doing anything.
Big problem is the big party is control both parties, and they do it well. And people only listen to them, and that's what problem is. And I know people guys talk about the Black Republicans. It's very hard for a Black Republican to sit here and try to make sense of all this stuff because nobody's gonna listen to them. Nobody, I give them a lot of praise for being Republican, but like I said, they're not going to have that audience as a Democrat Party. And we see it year after year, and someone on probably like someone like that it was Trump, and he was bigger. He crossed the board. He went out, and Black people is not going to sit here and rock off the spirit because they afraid to be called this and that and whatever, and so it's going to be stay like it is, and it's not going to change.
I'm curious because 1 second, Chief, because earlier when I was on his platform, MOT, well, he left, but Nagan, I'm probably saying your name wrong, and a couple other people, I got a lot of pushback for what I was saying. Now everybody's like quiet. So I'm pretty sure you don't agree with everything the judge is saying, or were you just disagreeing with what I was saying? Because me and MOT, I think we had the biggest disagreement because, as far as Democrats, Republicans, because he's saying, well, what is the Republicans doing? And I think where I was coming from is it's not about what they're doing or not doing, because they're going to do what they can do. They're going to do whatever you allow them to do. But when you're talking about Black people vote for the Democratic Party. Black
yes,
people
Well, but I'm
live in
saying
Democratic districts. Go ahead.
if you want me to push back against that, my problem with black people voting for Republicans would be what they're planning to do with Social Security, how that's going to affect black elders. If you look at their state parties, how they're talking about they want to repeal the Voting Rights Act, they're doing that in Texas. If you look at January 6th and their outright embrace of moving towards authoritarianism, you see people like DeSantis, who's going to be a leading candidate, trying to take Black history out of your schools.
It's not black history.
He's not taking black history
right.
out, he's taking black
it's
studies
queer.
out. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Queer
Also-
studies, black
and
queer
queer studies.
studies
What-
doesn't have anything to do with black history.
Exactly.
Yeah, no. He took away an AP. There was an AP course that the college board, that was an AP African American Studies course that the college board basically
Which
said,
is
"Hey, we're
connected
going
to
to."
queer theory.
He didn't know.
Queer theory.
It's not just that. They've taken books of like people like Ruby Bridges out of some schools.
Who is Ruby Bridges? Who is that?
The girl who went who integrated Little Rock, one of the Little Rock Nine.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
what happened is because we allowed some people to come in and attach all of these writing conditions to something black history that was in our best interest, we lost it all. See, in other words, there is this habit of piggybacking on something which is popular right now, that something being a title or a caption that deals with black folk, when actually the writers that are piggybacking have absolutely nothing to do with it. Now, I read what they're talking about in this advanced placement class. Even DeSantis said he had no problems with black history, in so much as the study of history is learning the lessons of the past so that you might apply them to your current activities to craft your tomorrow. That's why we study history. But studying somebody who is, off in a thing like black dance, okay, fine. Put that in theater arts or performing arts, not black history. Okay, you want to talk about the black queer thing, that's in sociology, not black history. But you see the trend that I saw from being involved in black history at UCLA 50 plus years ago was you take these things and you co-opt them and call them what the original thing is, and you lose it all. Like critical race theory pushed by Professor Crenshaw of UCLA. Well, guess what? 1967, Judge Joe Brown, then a student at UCLA, Cliff Stewart, later Dr. Cliff Stewart, Dr. Carey, and some other people who were students and some black professors in 1967 submitted a proposal for black history to be run under the Minority Affairs Department. And my ex-roommate showed me a copy of that 2 years ago. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "For me," he said, "that's what we wrote up." I said, "Oh, yeah, it is." And then he said, "Take a look at this." And it was Professor Crenshaw's plagiaristic snatch of what we came up with some critical differences, which essentially amount to this. We said, this is what you need to know about American history as it pertains to us and our part in it and the lessons we should get out of it. And they changed it around into, oh, woe is us, how bad we've done. And instead of inspiring somebody to get angry and motivated about it, they're giving somebody an excuse to get depressed, despair, and blame somebody, scapegoat somebody, which ain't crap. So I understand her publish or perish bit, but hey, if you're going to steal it, get it right.
Well, I quickly say, too, that with Kimberly Crenshaw, she's in the area of intersectionality. She is a part of CRT, but the main person in CRT, he is dead now, is Derek Bell.
Well, yeah, but black history, not black studies or black affairs, where it gets into, you know, we have everything else that certain folk want to push for this secular religion they're trying to impose on the country. I mean, it deals with bedroom activities. That's their business, but don't try to impose it on the rest of us. All right.
Yeah, also they took out several history of you was talking about Black Republicans. They took a lot of history of that and speeches from Malcolm X. You remember one of the great speeches Malcolm X said, one of the greatest threat in the Black community was what? The Black liberal. They took that out of there. You won't see stuff like that and not teaching that. You can hardly see, the story about Malcolm X.
I never saw it in schools I never saw that when I was in school. So it's a lot of.
I did.
I
did.
Yeah, I did too.
So that was already out of the schools when I was coming up in the schools. And I learned that in my community at the library, organizations that were teaching Black studies. So I didn't have to rely on the school system to be taught about my lineage or Black history, and even real factual American history. But I just have a question for Renaissance. You brought up intersectionality. And I think that's a problem too. I don't like intersectionality because what I'm starting to see, particularly, I think all people try to use that for that advantage, but what I'm starting to see, particularly with liberals, Black people and white liberals, Black liberals, white liberals, they're using that and wiping out the Black boy and Black man via intersectionality and replacing that with immigrants, Black women, and everybody else.
I disagree. When you start talking about intersectionality, I mean, to me, it has a benefit because it looks at how people experience the world. For example, if you look at Black men, you wouldn't know because historically people just studied men and they looked at the relationship between height and how people were perceived. Well, when you look at studies, people thought, hey, height is a positive thing associated with leadership, all of this. When you look at the intersection, look at a Black man in comparison to a white man and how height affects how he is perceived. He is actually perceived as more of a threat. There's actually even data that says that he is he is pulled over by the police for being taller. So I think it provides people an opportunity to look at how the world and how things affect people differently, and thus you can craft better policy as well as understand people's, walk in their shoes a little better.
Well, I
get your point. Wait, 1 second, Chief. 1 second. I get your point, but it was Kimberly Crenshaw. She did a TED talk about the urgency of intersectionality, and her conclusion was say her name. She said, basically the intersectionality of being a Black woman and police brutality, right? And her whole TED talk, it was interesting, and she laid it out. But basically, what she actually did, she did not include the Black man or the Black boy. She just focused on women. And so what she actually did was she said that Black women, are affected and not getting recognized for being killed or, being harassed or police brutality. They're not getting recognized. There are no headlines. So say her name. As opposed to what, Kimberly? As opposed to the Black boys and Black men that are getting gunned down or facing police brutality.
So you have a problem with how she's using it. It's not intersection. You have a problem.
That's what I'm saying, where
you have a problem with how she's using it, though. That's my point.
She's using it specifically painting a picture for Black girls, but that picture that she's painting, particularly about police brutality, really affects Black boys and Black men at a higher rate than Black girls. So why are you just singling on one gender and not just Black people?
Well,
I think
so I'll make this quick point. Just a quick point. I think this is the weakness. This has been a problem with the left going back for centuries, is that, the left tend to turn against it themselves in certain, issues and policies, whereas in the right, they kind of consolidate themselves under, one, talking point. So the main thing is the left has a tendency where, police brutality affects Black men more, but then some Black women, feel a type of way about it. Then you have LGBTQ shit, and then it devolves into like infighting. So that I agree that there's some issues with that. But the thing is, with the right in this country, for example, they don't want to address police brutality at all. They don't give a shit. So it's like a
That's
damned
not,
if you do, they're damned if you don't. Like the right don't. I mean, when it comes to George Floyd, you saw what was the response to that was just like, oh, well, the first point was like, oh, well, what did he do wrong? Oh, he probably deserved it. Oh, well, they look into his past. So it was just always like an issue of just like not looking at him as a human being, but just trying to figure out a justification. Well, the cops probably did something. But the thing is, in the left is like, this has been a problem going back. I mean, if you look at like the Spanish Civil War, the left, the reason why they lost that war is because they were so divided, they turned against themselves. So that's the issue with the left. So yeah, that's the quick point I'm.
I did have one question for the judge real quick. He was saying he's an independent. Is there anybody in politics right now, preferably more of a national or federal, but you don't have to be, who would embody what you want to see in an ideal politician? I guess their policy standpoints or how they vote or.
Yeah, there he is. You're talking to him. That's why I'm running for mayor. I don't have to do this. I'm retired. I've got all the money I need. I don't give a damn about that. It's about principle. And frankly, I don't know whether there's a heaven or a hell, but I'd rather be somebody that did something while I was still breathing that I get remembered favorably for, or ill-favored in an ill-favored fashion for doing the right thing. Yeah. It's a matter of principle. I've been around here too damn long to take one more insult, one more slight, and it's time to do something about it if you're in a position to do so.
Wait. So then, Judge, could you, I guess, lay out, say, your vision since you're running for mayor of Memphis from a policy standpoint of what
policy.
You hope to change?
We have to have safe streets, but you can't have safe streets if you have no character in the people. You got to fix that. You need income and you need industry to generate income. Income and industry are not going to come unless there's safety in the streets. So you have to do something about taking that back. You have to use citizens to participate in the safety process themselves. You don't need you don't need civilian oversight of police. You need the civilians to run the police where they become the command authority, like the Pentagon. You need total revision on that. You need to deal with the educational system and make it effective so that it prepares the student for the realities of the 21st century. You need to bring in traffic directly from Europe up that Mississippi River into the distribution node for the North American continent, which is in Memphis. You've got the Mississippi River. You can use hydroelectric modular generators to generate all of the electric power you need for this area. You can sell that all up and down the Mississippi to Chicago, to Little Rock, to Oklahoma City, and all points in between. And this can be the expansion of a hydroelectric industry combined with solar electric industry that becomes the Silicon Valley for the 21st century to do what the dot-com revolution did. You can take advantage of the fact that Ford Motor Company and Cadillac are putting in total electric car factories that are going to be employing up to 50,000 people nearby. And that's going to require a town not too far away of about 150, 200,000 people in total to support all that. You have the opportunity of this becoming the Detroit for the 21st century. We can ship cars down the Mississippi River over to Europe and into the Pacific, into Asia, through the Suez Canal, bring them right back the other way, save Asia 9,000 miles on shipping stuff across the Pacific Ocean. We got a lot of stuff we can do.
But quick question to dig into that a little bit. When you start talking about, say, you're going to, make the streets safer and get people more involved, how are you going to do that? Same things like reforming the school system. You're going to have to deal with the school board. How are you going to do
I control the city attorney. We will file lawsuits. I have people in mind, not these idiots who are clueless that are hired because they are glamour appointments and they give somebody a sociological or political advantage, or you are paying back somebody patronage wise. I don't give a damn, because the term, you are limited to 2 terms anyway. And that changed after some brother got elected 5 times, but 2 terms, I don't care. I don't have any aspirations past that. I will kick butt, take names, and kick them more when they need it. So we will bring in people who are effective to do this. There are people around who can do this. I'm not one of these clowns that sits at a desk twiddling thumbs without a clue and talking about, I'm going to come up with a program and appoint people who are just clueless bureaucrats to run the program. Meanwhile, my friends get money under the table. That's not the way it works. So we will have an effective thing. And I call on one 10-year period we had as a study here in Tennessee, where the statewide recidivism rate for felons was 80%. In my courtroom, it was only 80%, because I marshaled the local resources. Unlike any other judge in America, I had unions, schools, hospitals, scientists, doctors, psychologists, all cooperating in this. And we were doing stuff that was making a dent on things. And if you walk around Memphis would be right now, you go through a mall or someplace, there are likely to be 4, 5, 10 people who walk up to me and say, Judge, you remember me? No, I don't. Well, you gave me some time. Did I give you enough? Yeah, but see, it was that thing where you straightened me out and you got me thinking right and what time it was. And, you know, for the last 27 years, I haven't been in any trouble. I'm a grandfather, you know, and happily married and blah, 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 blah. So it works. And you see, there are leadership methodologies that have worked all the way since the Roman legions. And we can still reimpose those things because humans haven't changed that much. We are the same creature that once lived in caves. Now we live in condos, and we're forgetting what got us from point A to B. So we can reimpose those things. We can bring them back. Yeah. And let me tell you something. You take youth who are disenfranchised, cut out of the mix, feel that there is a hopeless tomorrow, where they are the victims of an unassailable adversary, and you turn them into the mind process of a 13-year-old boy going after severe adversarial opposition known as Simba that lead him with a wooden spear, and you get some magnificent young men. I ran a playground in South Central LA called Trinity Avenue Elementary School with 2 other people, Dr. Ron Chappelle and Dr. Clifford Stewart, now the late Dr. Stewart. We were all in the martial arts and stuff. We turned this around. We changed the community that was at one of the worst locations in LA. And it became a prosperous place. We have got people that were our students. One of them is a major general in the Army. 2 of them are brigadier generals. We had somebody that was commander of a nuclear aircraft carrier. We had 2 people that commanded R.L.I. Burt destroyers, and a whole lot of doctors, lawyers, engineers who came out of the hood that we dealt with. So we even have a Republican member of the California Central Committee for the Republican Party, but we had 2 interesting people that exemplify how you can fail, but we learned from that and succeed. One of them was the singer Barry White, who was a skinny 12-year-old kid when he was on our playground. We got him, we got his mama, and he did what he did. And the other one, his mama wanted that check. She wouldn't let him go. We couldn't get him out of the swamp, so he became the baddest ass alligator in the swamp. That was Tookie Williams, who co-founded the Crips out in LA. And he became the last person executed on California death row. But he was smart as the devil. He learned, and he wrote 6 children's books that he got awards for, and he should have had his death sentence commuted to life. But we can do it. There are methods. And trust me, when you know what they are and you apply them, they work. They always work.
But the biggest problem, hold on. The biggest problem is, I agree with everything you're saying, Judge, but one thing about Memphis is you're going to see a lot of pushback because
now, goddamn that pushback. I know where the skeletons are in the closets there in the damn graveyard. Those son of a bitches are lucky if I don't see them put in a federal penitentiary or a state penitentiary by what I can initiate. You see, they need to stay the hell out of the way, go along with the program, because if I get one damn peep, I'm sicking the city attorney's office on them, and I will drop the dime on them.
Yeah, because they are afraid of change. Because you know how many times we had tried to get Memphis up and like Nashville and Knoxville. We have jobs here, but no one. They had a brand new warehouse. Walmart has a brand new warehouse that's open in January. They can't get 100 people in there because they can't pay the damn background check. And paying.
That's a problem. You have 62% of the folks 35 and under in Shelby County with felony convictions. Let me tell you about the Walmart. We've got a local group, including somebody running for mayor here, whose scam is to take Walmart structures that have been forsaken because Walmart is consolidated. They find them for unpaid taxes in the possession of various municipalities. So they get the municipality to sell it to them for cheap. They convert it into prisons or jails, rent the properties back to the municipalities for more per month than they paid for it. See, that's one of the scams they do.
Wait. Question real quick. I'm sorry, Renaissance, did you wanted to go?
Oh, I just wanted to quickly ask him, how is he gonna self-fund this campaign?
We are raising it $10, $20, $100, $200 from ordinary people. Go to followthemoney.com and you will see who owns some of the other candidates in the race or where you live. Follow the money, not .com, followthemoney.org. Followthemoney.org and look up your favorite politician and see who's contributed how much and when to them and what that represents.
So, and anybody who's listening, if you want to contribute to Judge Joe Brown campaign, go to www.jjb2023.com. So I have a question, Judge, because Nagoon 11.
Can you put that link in the chat, please, if you have it?
I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Just remember Judge Joe Brown, jjb2023.com.
Right,
and we also have a Cash App, $ Judge Joe Brown 2023. So we're raising money, but the point is, you see, I don't need name recognition. For 15 years, I had a TV show. In the last 5 years, it was the first or second most popular syndicated show in America. I was beating Oprah in the ratings every week. They didn't say that, but I was, so a lot of people know me. They trusted me, so I don't need name recognition. I have people running up saying, is it true? Is it true? Oh my God, please. See, so I actually have 50 years worth of doing something for this community, one way or the other, and it's known, and the rest of these people don't have name recognition, and a lot of them have reputations right now they're trying to build up by feeding off of carcasses. So
can you do me a favor? Because Nagoon, he feels as though that he's too intelligent to explain the Southern strategy. I just think he just can't explain it. So can you enlighten me and others on the Southern strategy then? And is it still affecting Black people today, particularly in
the Southern strategy embraces Black people now, because fundamentally there is now very little difference between the typical Southern strategy and Black folk. The typical Southern strategy was basically one that assessed so-called values. Now, we have a movement afoot to destroy the traditional nuclear family and manhood. And when you realize that is a driving engine behind a lot of decent Black folk, what they go to church for, what they aspire to, and what they get pissed about having neglected, that is the same driving engine that motivates most white people. There is a very high commonality between what's going on between Black folk and white folk in the South now, if they realized it. White folk want attention paid to the middle class and the small businessman. Black folk want attention paid to the middle class and the small businessman. White folk want good government that's honest. Black folk want good government that's honest. Black folk and white folk want some respect for manhood. Black folk and white folk want respect for traditional values. Black folk and white folk are sick of being told that men are toxic, so get out of the way, while somebody that hates them gets into an office and does nothing for them except makes them look like, oh,
excuses.
man, what is this mess? Deliver. We are tired, black and white men, of getting told that it's all about your emotions and no reality. We are tired of getting excluded from raising our sons and daughters, white and black men, white women and black women who are savvy to what's going on. And we don't like this. We're tired of getting told you can't talk about courage and bravery, but you got to talk about rainbow. We're tired of getting told we can't talk about manhood, but you can talk about somebody dressed up like a woman and he's out there trying to seduce the children. And what is it? Switch them around to something else. So, I mean, you got a lot of commonality now between black folk and white folk in the South.
Judge, I would have to push back again. Oh, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have 1 minute left. I just want to wrap
I'm
it up.
saying in the South, not necessarily in the rest of the country, but in the South, there are these things.
Well, the only push
you go sit in a bar or a pub and you see all of these black men who are sick and tired of what's going on.
Let him say what he got to say because he's got.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say I'd have to push back in the sense of I would argue that that's kind of always existed. I would argue that the Southern strategy has been effective, and I think it'll continue to be effective at keeping black and white apart, specifically in the South, because that's where it's been most effective. If you look at racial resentment, whites' resentment towards the civil rights movement, things like that, how that fueled policy in the 70s, 80s, things along those lines. It's a very idealistic view. I'm just very cynical of it.
Well, let me ask you to do this. I shoot. Chief does too. Get yourself a gun magazine and check out the fact that major gun manufacturers are now using black folk by name to advertise their products. Look at the gun magazines and see the articles on black folk carrying weaponry and defending themselves. Look at the articles where they have black women in there as exemplars of needing protection.
Correct.
When you start getting gun magazines coming off of, I've been reading them for 65 years.
So
when you start seeing that, it's like there was an interesting thing when you start seeing black people portrayed as president of the United States, as you did Morgan Freeman sometimes, or something like that, or in some of the series that you had on TV, then America would elect somebody as president who was black. That came to pass. When you start seeing black folk given a lot of play, black organizations, black gun clubs, black people advertising and giving prominent displays in gun magazines, you say, whoa, we've got a real serious adjustment going on here. We've got a
new market to appeal to, and also a lot of that surge happened in response to Trump as well.
Yeah,
I'll make this point.
I've been in pubs and bars where there are black working men around and they don't want to have somebody. The only person white that they'll talk about favorably is Trump. They like him. And remember, 30 years ago, you couldn't be a rap star black unless you were a friend with Trump. You couldn't be a black politician unless you indicated that you were friends with Trump. He was engaged to a beautiful black model before he married his current wife. I mean, he's never shunned black folk. He's the one that got the finance together for Jesse's 2 runs for president and provided him with free headquarters for the time and transportation. So he's not necessarily been an enemy of black folk. And most of the black people I know that know him says he doesn't like anybody who's not trying to do something, but he doesn't care who you are if you are trying to do something.
Well,
In
I'd
fact,
have
well,
to,
the
I'd have to
one
point you,
caveat
Judge, to
I'll
Central
say
Park
is that
5 and
oh,
his lawsuits for discrimination. Those
Well,
two.
look, that thing, look.
well, the
Frankly,
Central Park
that
Five. I
Central
mean,
Park 5 is such bullshit. One of the Negroes got brought down to the police by his daddy to confess to the crime and implicated the other four. So it was a horrible crime. So these folk didn't exactly get discovered. One of them came down and turned everybody in. So when you have a situation like that, yeah. But you see, the media played it around. Now, I've sat in on many a video of an interrogation and a confession. And Chief has too. And he'll tell you some of these OGs that are talking about, yeah, man, they just put the case on me. They lied. When you see the video, they've got snot running down their nose, tears all down their faces, go through half a box of Kleenex crying for their mama. And the detective is saying, young man, you really need to stop and let us get you a lawyer. It won't hurt you, We'll wait. I just want to see my mama, man. You let me see my mama, girl. I swear, I tell you, she'll stomp in Billy Hell, man. Hey,
I can totally vouch for
man.
that. I can.
Man.
I think we're about to wrap it up.
See,
well,
you can see these OG fools talking smack about what happened to them, and they did it to themselves. See, let me give you a secret. There's some innocent people in the prisons, but here's the statistic. Just over 2% of the folk in the penitentiaries got convicted by a jury. 97+% copped out. And most of them punked out when they copped out, and it had such bad records they couldn't get on a stand and testify because it'd come out on cross-examination. Next thing, 84 to 87%, depending upon the year, confessed. And as a private defense lawyer, a whole lot of your clients are guilty as hell. You've discussed particulars with them, and then they tell their parents or mama, I ain't done nothing. They just put the case on. I wasn't even there. Fool, what did you tell us? You wasn't even there. Man, they got 5 people ID'd you, and you sitting there talking about one of them couldn't have seen you because he was trying to light up a cigarette, and you were behind the dumpster in the shadows, so he couldn't have seen you.
You know how many times I had videos of the guy doing something, and I showed it to the mama, and you clearly see that's his son. That's not my son. That's my son right there. And straight what? They in denial. I raised him right. But how did you raise him? We can't say that no more. Back in the day, we could say that. How did you raise your son? Now we can't say anything like that no more. But it's constant. I had guys burst out crying as soon as I opened the door and put it in turn. He burst out crying. They should just left and right, especially when they find out that you're gonna spend a couple days in jail like that. They think it wouldn't be life. They come out crying. You're absolutely right. Big talk, 6'6". 6'7". But I know.
Yeah, let's give closing thoughts. Let's go around and give closing thoughts.
Yes.
I'll go
ahead, Mike, and close out. No, thank you, Judge, for coming up. Thank you, Dana. Always nice to have a different opinion, and appreciate you all answering my questions. And thanks for letting me come up, Mike.
Yes, sir. Anybody else?
Yeah, so
I'll make a quick one. Hey, you got to do what you got to do. Be strong. Don't let it get you down. Adversity is what you face in the world. You'll never get around it until you're dead and buried in the ground or burned up and put in a jar. So deal with it, and remember, don't always fall for the sob story. A lot of folk doing things wrong. They weren't Robin Hood. They were robbing the hood. So do right, be strong, and you can get what you deserve.
Thank you, Judge Joe Brown, thank you, Judge, for stopping through. And we really appreciate it.
All right, my pleasure. Dana made me do
it. I can imagine.
And so great topic, great debate. It was dope that the judge came, Judge Joe Brown. I mean, I grew up watching him as a kid, and it's dope to see him come into this conversation. I follow him on Twitter, so I know he's running for mayor of Memphis. So it was a really good, interesting topic, and we need more of these debates for our community.
Thank you for coming up.
Mike? Hey, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Thanks for inviting me tonight. Talk to you later.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's it, Nagoon?
Okay, let's say one
You
last
got a
thing.
lot to say in the chat, honey.
Yeah. One last thing. Just talk about
Father.
being
I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief.
biggest problem we have in Black communities is one word is independent, and unfortunately, Black people are afraid to be independent, and that's the key thing right there. They can embrace it, love it, and show it, and we be better today with this. And my thoughts to Judge, we need to talk. Thanks, Dana.
Hey, thanks for coming up, Chief.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Hopefully, you let me come back up.
Absolutely.
no.
This is
The Black Brain Trust doesn't discriminate, as you know, Dana. They respect all thoughts.
chaos. I have this. Thank you.
Yeah, because you know what? Sometimes I listen and I just listen because I like to listen to some of your shows because it is kind of relaxing, you know, some of the topics that y'all talk about. So it's like a real mellow but good discussion. But you know what? I was triggered because you had Roland Martin, your thumbnail, and he triggers me. So that's why I was like, let me listen. And I was like, wait a minute, I want to put my 2 cents and, you know, and it just elevated to something else. But I really appreciate you having me up, and I definitely want to keep listening. And definitely come on when I catch a Sunday show, because this was fun. So I appreciate you and appreciate everybody that was up here. And whenever you want the judge to come back on, just let me know and he'll be glad to, because he was listening too and he enjoyed the conversation. So
absolutely. Your 2 cents was well spent here.
Thank you.
Same thing here. Please let me know as well. You too, Dana.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please hit the like button on the way out and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust.